We'll start off with a roll call vote. Sure everybody's here and connected. So Mr. Path.
Here.
And Mr. DeLay.
Yeah.
Ms. Conant. I think you are muted.
I'm here.
All right. And Mr. Gotti.
Here.
All right, so we're all here. And I'm just going to start off with our usual opening description of things. Welcome everyone to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. All meetings are televised by Westwood Media Center, broadcast by Westwood Media Center, live on local cable television channel Comcast 12 and Verizon 42. The meetings are also available on the YouTube channel for Westwood Media Center, and they're live streamed. If you're having any trouble logging into Zoom, please go to zoom.us, click on Join Meeting, and enter the meeting ID 827-4172-5652. So that's if someone's watching this live and wants to log on so that you'll be able to participate in the public comment part. So if this was an in-person meeting, I would ask people who wanted to record the meeting to identify themselves, but it's okay if anyone records this, so we don't need to do that. While you are not speaking, please turn off your cell phone ringers and mute the Zoom session so that we avoid any background noise. We start this meeting with just the board members and the professional staff unmuted. As additional people come in, they'll be like presenters the video will be turned on and they can speak and we'll unmute them. Usually I outline the process. Tonight we have essentially just 2 public hearings. So we're going to have those public hearings, and I will, as we start that off, I will describe in each one to be a little bit different process because I want to ensure that we have a good amount of discussion, as well as kind of attempting to stick to a time frame here so that we are not, people who come early are not waiting for hours and hours to speak. So I'll talk more about that as we go through, or what I suggest for the process as we get to each of those agenda items. And we will likely, we'll talk about each item as we get to it. So that's essentially where we are. Do we have the first, Abby, are there any changes or anything new on the agenda this evening?
Hold on, I'm sorry. I think some people are just having trouble getting in, but no, we have no changes. I'm just trying to resend the link to some people, the committee members. We're just waiting for Jack and Jessica also. I think this is maybe Jessica here. If anyone's having trouble, it is on the home page of the website as well, on the meeting calendar.
Connor, safe to assume the graphic is up on the screen too, and the
yes, down below on the screen for those who are watching on cable or on YouTube is the login information for Zoom, which has the Zoom ID and phone number that you can call into, as well as the passcode. That's been up since Davis started talking, so if anybody wants to access that quickly, it'll be on the screen right now, and I'll leave it up for a little bit as well.
Thanks, Connor.
So I assume, Abby, you're trying to help people.
Yes, I'm sorry. People want me to text it. I have trouble texting it now.
So I think, well, the first item on the agenda will be a public hearing for our review of the comprehensive plan. And I wanted to propose a process for this because we have a very large, very long document. It's the result of over 2 years of work. Again, I'll let the presenters talk more about that, but The comprehensive plan includes 9 sections that deal with specific areas of topics. And I think that it would be best if we could consider each of those sections in order and have a brief presentation and then questions, board members, and open it up to public comment on that topic. And so to go through in that manner so that we can address the substantive details of each section, as opposed to having kind of a very long presentation and some comments and things, and then finally public involvement way after everything's going on. So that's the process that we are proposing here tonight. So we'll start that off with an intro, and then go to the first section, and then open it up for board member questions and public comment. I do want to, we're not going to finish it tonight. So we're not going to, at the end of the evening, adopt a plan. That's just not going to happen. We know that this is going to take more than one evening to discuss. And so I want to encourage this process to be mindful of, there's 9 sections. And so it's not just that, it's not like I want to go to bed early tonight or anything, but I do not want us to be at midnight when we haven't gotten to the last 3 sections. And there's people probably who come to the meeting who want to talk about the later sections. So I believe with 9 sections, if we go through this process, we could get through in 90 minutes. If there was 10 minutes per section, it could work. There might be some sections where there's not a lot of discussion. There's others where it may lead to a great deal of discussion, and perhaps we could recognize that as we're going over it, and say we'll continue this at the next at our next meeting. We likely will continue the entire hearing to that point. So just like sort of setting the stage, I'd like to encourage that process, because I know so many times we have meetings that go on for a very long time, and there may be people who come in at 7 o'clock who have something they want to talk about, and they think they would talk about it at 8:30 or 9, and it's forever before they get to it. So that's just an outline of things there. Abby, how do we have people ready to go yet, or?
Yes, I think so. Yep. Sorry, we got a lot of the new committee members. Jack Wiggin, and I see a lot of the other members are in now, so I have them here as panelists.
All right. So that's the first item on our agenda. Do you want to bring up the slides for that?
Yep.
And we'll open the public hearing on the Westwood's comprehensive plan.
All right, let me just share my screen here.
Okay, so this is just summarizing what I was ad-libbing. We want to.
Abby, can you put that into presentation mode so it fills the screen for everyone?
Oh, yes.
Great.
There you go.
So that's a presentation of the full plan by section, questions and comments from board and public with each section. And then at the end, more general overall things. We're also, because this has went to the select board a while ago, and I've not heard if those comments have been included yet or where those are, but there will obviously be additional comments. People are welcome to submit email comments after this meeting and before the next meeting of this board, so that all the board members will be able to read those comments. And again, we're likely to continue this hearing to our next meeting, which is Tuesday, December 1st, on the same kind of Zoom approach. So that's an outline of what I proposed for how we approach this. And I will, at that point, turn it over to Ms. Brigham to start us off here.
Great. All right. Am I on then, Abby? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we finally reached a milestone here where the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee completed a draft after a 2-year process, and now we're ready to talk directly with the planning board about what the content of that plan is, and at this public hearing, and see if we can't advance it a little bit further than that. I think, as you mentioned, the plan is a long document, and it's quite detailed. And so I guess our approach here would be to do an overview, a very brief overview of what the plan is, how it got into the state that it's in now, what the process was, and then talk about its structure, and then begin to go through the plan section by section. And we won't be going line by line through recommendations or anything. The planning board has had the document for a couple of weeks. It's been on the town's website, so people have had a chance to hopefully look through it and decide any areas where they might have a comment. So that's our mutually agreed way that we think that we'll do this. So my name is Jack Wigan. I've served as the chairman of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee since its existence. I can't see on my screen everybody who's here, but I believe that most of the steering committee has signed on. Steve Olenoff is the vice chair, and there are 16 members of the committee, which I'll come to in a moment. The entire committee was invited, and while I'll be doing the overview, we do hope that as we go through this and the board has its comments and questions, that members of the committee will decide that they would like to jump in and make some comments as well. And of course, as we have throughout the process, we're going to rely on the town planner, Abby McCabe, to help us through this as well. So in the summer of 2018, the planning board decided that it was time to update the 2000 comprehensive plan. And as most communities do, the comprehensive plan steering committee was created to lead the process. And really the reason for doing that, even though a comprehensive plan is the planning board's responsibility and the planning board has the authority to approve a plan, the reason why most communities create a separate committee to do that is twofold, really. One is to ensure broad participation throughout the community. And the second is to allow the planning board to continue its day-to-day functions, which are quite time consuming, the regulatory reviews and so forth they're responsible for. So having a separate committee allows that planning process to go forward. The Board of Selectmen did the appointments in November of 2018. There were the select board appointed 18 members, 2 of which dropped out during the process due to other commitments that prevented them from fully participating. I'd have to say the committee was excellent. It was fully engaged throughout the process, doing outreach, research, policy development, and drafting. And of course, we couldn't have done it without Abby McCabe, who was instrumental in all of our activities. Next slide, Abby. So let me talk a bit about what a comprehensive plan is. A plan is a long-range visioning document for the town. It's got goals, it's objectives, it's got recommendations or implementing actions, but all of that together reflects the shared values of the community because of the process that we went through to create it. An important role of the plan in what happens in the town, I think, is illustrated by looking at the 2000 plan, the community's last adopted plan, looking at the recommendations that were in that plan, and then seeing the amount of recommendations that were carried forward in the next decade or two, and that involves a number of significant amendments to the zoning bylaw. You know, the creation of the flexible mixed-use overlay district, the creation of the University Avenue mixed-use overlay district, the district in Westwood Center that allowed apartments to be built over retail in the old Colburn School building, some changes to the open space residential development bylaw that increased the incentives for affordability and open space protection and so forth. So there were a number of things done regulatory wise. And in addition, there was a big focus at that time on open space preservation. The committee called Open was created as a result of that plan. That committee basically morphed into the Westwood Land Trust, and the Westwood Land Trust has gone on to protect a couple hundred acres of the community. So the plan lays out some visions and goals, and then in the subsequent years, many of those recommendations and goals are pursued. So about the plan itself, there are beyond some introductory material, there are 9 topical elements in the plan. 7 of the topics are listed in state statutes as being part of a comprehensive plan. We added 2. So the sections are land use, housing, economic development, natural and cultural resources, open space and recreation, services and facilities, transportation, and implementation. To that, we added a section on town centers because of the importance of that is to the community, and then a new section on sustainability and resilience. Each of the sections includes background on the topic, and that really covers the existing conditions. It displays some data analysis, some other information, some achievements since the last plan, and then goes into a series of objectives, and then finally into a series of implementing actions. That's how each of the sections are organized. While there are 9 separate sections, they all are interrelated. So as they were created, we were looking back at the older sections and making sure that they were consistent and that they were mutually reinforcing. In doing the comprehensive plan, the committee benefited greatly from the fact that the town has been actively planning in a number of areas over the recent years. The town, the planning board in particular, approved an open space and recreation plan in February of 2019. The town approved a housing production plan in December of 2019, and the town engaged in a municipal vulnerability preparedness, a community resilience report in February of 2020. So each one of those documents that had been previously prepared and adopted by the town was used to prepare the appropriate sections in this comprehensive plan. So whatever policies and recommendations are in those plans, you'll see them carried forward into this comprehensive plan. In order to create the plan, the 16-member committee broke into subgroups, each responsible for 1 or more sections of that plan. And they worked together with a member of the planning board. So each of the 5 members of the planning board also participated in the creation of those sections as liaisons to those subgroups that prepared the topic. And as I said before, Abby McCabe was involved in all of that throughout. Next slide, please. Any successful plan prepared at the municipal level really benefits from community participation, both the plan itself and the process of going through that. And that community participation involves the residents, the town boards and committees and departments, as well as other stakeholders, such as the people who do business in the community. The public participation process that we went through is summarized on pages 3 and 4 of the plan, and then fully laid out in the appendices to the plan. So one can see exactly the kind of input that we received throughout the planning process. Reflecting the importance of public engagement to this whole plan, the community engaged with a facilitator and a public engagement consultant. It was the only consultant that we used throughout the preparation of this plan. And again, that sort of reflected the degree of importance that we gave to community outreach. The group that assisted us is the Community Circle and the Barrett Planning Group. We started out by doing a community survey, which was put out online and in paper to identify concerns and ideas of the residents and the business people. There were 16 questions in the survey, and we received back over 800 completed returns. We held a visioning session on Saturday, on May 19th at the Thurston Middle School. 60 people attended that, and that was a very productive session. We met with department heads and most of the committees in the town, so to ensure that the plan's policies and recommendations reflected the departmental and the committee objectives. As you can see up on the slide, we did 7 steering committee meetings, 5 meetings with the planning board, at which point we went through each of these sections in a draft form and so forth. So the public participation process was robust. So as by way of into a general introduction to the plan, take a look at the slide that says major themes on it. While we talk about these 9 different topic areas, there were things that the community emphasized throughout the planning process, and they're sort of reflected on this slide. People talked a lot about walkability, both in the town centers to improve sort of community cohesion, as well as connecting the community together with bike paths and pedestrian ways and improved ways of getting around, whether it's shuttle buses or what have you. People put a lot of emphasis on attractive streetscapes and particularly in the business communities and particularly in the town centers as places where people should be able to congregate, gather, and do their business. Inclusive housing opportunities was emphasized in specifically moderately priced housing. The town has made a commitment to achieving a threshold established by state statute in Chapter 40B. It has for the last 20 years, and we continue to advocate for that, but also with an eye towards producing moderately priced housing as well. This section talks about the importance of our public facilities and services, the schools, the recreational facilities, and so forth, our open space. There's an emphasis in this plan on sustainability, particularly renewable energy and energy efficiency to combat climate change. And there's some emphasis on climate change in the plan. And then the idea that for good decisions to be made, the community needs to collaborate on those decisions. So both between and among the various boards and committees that make those decisions and the towns and the town departments that have to carry them out. Next slide. So this is the first of the 9 sections of the plan, and I'll just introduce the topic, and then Mr. Chairman, you might want to then lead the planning board through its comments on it. So the land use section, in a way, reflects a lot of the objectives and the recommendations that are made in the other topical sections of the plan. And it also reflects the policies that were established in 2000 in that plan too. So you'll see a lot of continuity from this plan to the next. But these recommendations really focus on protecting and retaining the character of the community. The town is largely built out, so there's not a lot of, as you might see in another less developed town, there's not a lot of talk about where new residential development should occur, where new business where opportunities to expand business. We're pretty mature suburb, and so our opportunities really are focusing on improving what we have, increasing what we have, but really in a way where we're more or less intensifying the kinds of things we have and improving the quality of those. One of the recommendations you see there is, and this is picked up in several sections of the plan, is that to the extent that municipally owned property becomes available through surplusing it or so forth, there's a number of opportunities in the plan where that municipal property could be used to advance one or more of the plan's goals. So I think I'd leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, and turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wigan, and thank you to the members of this committee that have worked on this for the last 2 years. It's a tremendous amount of work, and reading through it, you can see the amount of effort that went into this, and kind of the many people that have been involved in drafting this. So what I was thinking for our discussion now is, rather than kind of go through in order, it's just if board members, if you could just raise your hand if you have a question or comment or would like to speak on this first. We'll go board members first, and then we would open it up. Mr. Gotti, did you want to start?
Thanks, Dave. And I'd like to, echo what you just said, saying thank you to everybody for the time, dedication, and care that you all put into this plan. While I wasn't on the planning board throughout the 2 years that you were putting this together, I did watch every one of the meetings that was recorded on Westwood Media Center and the visioning session. And I have to compliment you all on being a model for how collaboration really should be achieved. I mean, the amount of thoughtful dialogue and active listening and respectful debate and discussion was outstanding. It starts clearly with the chair, but it extends to everybody who was part of it. So thank you all for the hard work that went into it. Dave, before we jump to the land use section that we're talking about, I did have one comment that I wanted to make sort of on the overall, like the vision itself. I think that the preamble or the purpose statement needs to reflect sort of the aspirational future looking nature of the document and lay out the fact that it's really guide, not gospel, and it was assembled without any real concern for or worry about the resource constraints of time, money, and people. It's not this is all has to happen. It is it's representative of what the community wants to see and how the future of the town is shaped. So I had some comments on that, particularly on the last couple of sentences, if I could share those with you.
Yes, go ahead. Did you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So, so where we have and I'll give you the page number so that people can follow along here. On the actual PDF, it's page 7, paragraph 1. I sort of struck the last 2 sentences and suggested that it be replaced with comprehensive plan is not a mandate of things that must be done. It's developed without consideration of resource requirements. It's a forward-looking document that captures the vision of the community on how we would like to see the town continue to evolve. The document serves as a guide for the community on how we might achieve the vision laid out in the plan. Town officials, decision makers, businesses, and residents should consider the vision and goals laid out in the plan when crafting policies, goals, and zoning bylaws that will shape the town over the next decade. So I just think it captures that the breadth of the ideas that are in here, but also recognizes that resources that are not infinite, and these are recommendations that we'd like to see as part of the shaping of the future of the town.
Thank you, Rob. If anyone wants to raise their hand, anyone has any comments on land use?
Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Bath. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sorry. Not sure how helpful it would be to get into minutia of edits. I do have some, but I think I'd rather submit those via email or something to you, Jack, Mr. Wigan. I do. This is the first time that I've had the opportunity to read the document as a document instead of section by section by section. And one of the comments I had made when we first started this process, we talked about hiring a consultant or somebody to actually do the writing of this document. I think the town made the financial decision to do it this way. And I think I agree with that decision. One of the things that I cautioned was that the document not appear fragmented when read. And I'm not, right now, I don't want to comment on land use specifically, but I did notice in reading this, and I've read it twice since we received it from Abby, there is a definite distinction between sections in the tone of each section. And some are a little closer to others, but there are some that are really, I think, for lack of a better word, deviate from a collective town vision for our town's future, and sometimes read more of as a heavy-handedness, like parent to child, and this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to do. And so, Jack, I don't know if you want me to get into some of the specifics of that, or that was a concern I had going into this entire process. And it's kind of, in my mind, as I read this, it's kind of borne out and I'm not at all trying to discredit all the hard work that's gone into this. I know what's gone into this, but I think we all are interested in creating the best document we can. And if I don't raise my thoughts on this, then I'm not doing my job as an elected official. So, Jack, what would you like to do with regard to this?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Chris. And I suppose that the way the plan was prepared, that was always a possibility. We did work hard on that. I won't say that we weren't successful throughout, but maybe if you had a good example, Chris, you might point to that example, and we can see what adjustments we could make.
Well,
It's a matter of tone.
And largely, yes. I read the first 7 sections, and they were generally similar. And I got to transportation, and then I got to sustainability, and there was a much different approach to the statements.
Okay.
It almost, let's see my notes.
Yeah.
Transportation, it sounded more of like, we can do better, even if it's going to cost us money. And don't let money be the excuse for not doing anything. I didn't sense that anywhere else in this document in any other sections leading up to that particular section. And again, it's more of it's definitely not substance, it's style.
Okay.
And so I'm not critiquing the work that's gone into it, but reading this for the first time as an entire document, I got that sense. And then when I got to sustainability, it seemed even more so that the town is moving in this direction. I didn't get a sense that they said, this is what we've learned through our process. It's more of, we would be fools not to act on all this information we have about climate change or something. We would be irresponsible to not do something, as opposed to the town has expressed a concern that we address climate change, and we think we can do it this way. So again, it may be nitpicking, but I saw it as a big difference in the read.
Okay. All right,
So Chris,
Comment on that, Chris, because it's funny that the transportation section was actually the first one that was done, and I know exactly what you're commenting about, and we did mention that, and the sustainability was the last one that we got to, and but I admit the sustainability one we did get a little more right to the point than we did in other sections, because the feeling was that it is very important.
It's when you brought up transportation, you just recalled something that I read, and I made a note of it here somewhere. It actually makes reference to somewhere in there that the automobile traffic interferes with pedestrian and bicycle, and it's almost saying they are superior, and the cars are not to interfere with pedestrians and bicycles. Instead of I think the overriding sense of this document is, or at least that transportation is, we're looking for more of an equal footing for both, trying to bring bikes and pedestrians up to closer to automobiles, whereas that approach made it sound like cars are getting in the way of people walking and riding bikes on the streets. So that was just in a one thing I saw early on in the transportation document. That gave me pause about how it was being written, and then when I continued to read through, it made me realize it does have a different tone or tonality to the document, to that section.
let me suggest that when we get to that section, we could talk in more detail.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump.
I get it, like that you raised it, and I had a similar observation that there is a tone change and all, but why don't we can really get into that when we get to the transportation section. Did anyone have any specific land use issues they wanted to raise? I had one question. There's one of the implementing actions. I think it would be helpful to clarify exactly what's meant by L2, which is to support legislation to reform the state's zoning, planning, and permitting laws to provide the town with additional tools to pursue local objectives and better planning. I mean, it's a specific implementing action, but I think that what is meant by zoning reform can mean different things to different people, and it would be very helpful to spell that out more precisely.
This is something that I've been talking about for years, because for years we've been pushing for changes to 40A, the zoning act, because it is very much out of date, and I pointed it out as we've gone along, and I've had the planning board write letters to our state legislatures to try to enact that. It hasn't gotten very far. Each year it gets a little bit closer. That's what we're referring to. If it's not clear, we can fix that.
Yeah, and I think Chairman's point is that zoning reform act has been around for 15 or 20 years and it does evolve over time. So when you make a statement to support the state legislation, it depends on when you're making that statement about what the legislation looks like at that moment. So I think some clarity would be definitely helpful there, and we can do that. David, I noticed in the Q&A, somebody asked us all to identify ourselves. I see that we can see names in the corner of our boxes, but maybe other people can't.
Right, yeah, actually, let's go around. That's a good point, because we have all these people on the screen, and who are they necessarily? So I'm David Atkins. I'm the planning board member. And you just go to each person quickly.
I'm Pat O'Hearn, I'm town council.
Dave, it's going to be really hard to do because it's going to show up differently on everybody's screen. So why don't you call out each person and we can identify ourselves?
All right. Mr. Gotti.
Rob Gotti from the planning board.
Mr. Paff.
Chris Paff.
And Mr. DeLay stepped away. Ms. Conant.
Planning board, Debbie Conant.
Ms. Cole.
Hi, Jessica Cole. I just take the minutes.
Mr. Neville.
Yeah, Peter Neville. I worked on the comprehensive plan on the economic development.
Mr. Donahue.
Charles Donahue, worked on the open spaces and recreation part.
Mr. Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, and I'm the vice chair of the committee.
Mr. Vitti. You're on mute. And you're still on mute.
Yes, Planning Committee, Community Facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Hearn already identified himself. Ms. Longvall. Sheila. You're muted.
Sheila
Sorry.
Hanley Longville, Housing Subcommittee.
And Ms. Walsh.
Hi, Linda Walsh, Land Use Committee.
Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, Paula Jacobson on the Open Space and Recreation Plan.
All right. We have a few other people here who don't have video, but why don't we just go around and identify Nora Loughnane or
Nora Loughnane, Director of Community and Economic Development.
And Barbara Shea.
Hi, I was on the Housing Subcommittee, Barbara Shea.
Peter Kane.
Hi, Peter and Pam Kane. We were on Sustainability and Resilience Committee.
And let's see, Jan Madiri.
I am Jan Madiri. I worked on the National and Cultural Resources Subcommittee.
Thank you. And Mr. Lobenstein.
Hello, I worked on the Transportation Subcommittee with Steve Olenoff.
All right. Did we, and In the top corner there is Abby McCabe is the town planner. And we also have Connor Lynch on the screen here is with Westwood Media Center. Did we miss anybody from the presenters?
Nancy Donahue is also on here.
Welcome. All right, thanks everyone. So I think we can move to if there's any public comment, if anyone would like to speak on this.
Dave, I just have one more comment on the land use
Sure.
section. Looking at L7 and L8, I thought those two might benefit from being merged together. I think that I can appreciate the notion of trying to be illustrative with examples. I think if you broaden the language and put those two things together, you may be able to capture the spirit of it without actually getting too prescriptive on what types of things to pursue, because this is a document that will have to live for a decade. And I think that, we may have other things that are outside the current list that can still be captured by the essence of merging those two things together.
All right, thank you, Rob. So if there's anyone attending who would like to comment at this point, there's the Q&A. We already saw one question. If you want to enter something in the Q&A area, or if you're on the phone only, you can press *9. And like I said, we'll come back and we'll have, after each slide here that presents a major part of the plan, we'll do this kind of a round table. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand, so. And if somebody missed it, and we can go back if we're not going to tell someone they can't talk. So, all right, let's move on to the next slide then.
Okay, the next section of the plan is focused on town centers. And these recommendations really revolve around, through public and private investment, creating more vibrant, walkable centers that are welcoming community destinations. We heard that a lot from the community. Support and attract local businesses that serve residents' needs, particularly first floor uses that would attract foot traffic, coffee shops, cafes, restaurants, retail, that kind of thing. There was a lot of support for ensuring that any redevelopment in the town centers, there is a focus on the design so that we can maintain the character of the community and have that design reflect the character of the community. There are 20 recommendations in that section, and a few of them are bulleted on this slide. So the couple of actions that we thought that we would highlight is the idea that perhaps the planning board could consider exploring how to improve or elevate a design review process. And we're not specific on how that would be done, but just trying to pick up on the community's desire to ensure that the design is good. And then, and as I talked earlier, is promoting those kinds of uses that attract people to our town centers.
All right, thanks, Jack. There was a question that came in under the wire in the Q&A. Did you? And I answered it, and then it disappeared. So, oh, here it is. Okay, so I wondered if during this process, if there have been any thoughts to changes in the plan because of COVID, for example, housing density.
There definitely was some discussion about the impact of a pandemic like we've experienced with COVID, not so much in reducing housing density, but for instance, we talked about it in terms of the restaurants or cafes or eating establishment in Westwood, the recognition that it serves a purpose to allow people to be outside, and the select board and the planning board have been very accommodating of that as the pandemic became graver, and has allowed that to happen. And then I think we recognize that our open spaces and natural resources are really an important part of people being able to still recreate or get outside in a healthy environment.
Thanks, Jack. Any hand raise if anyone has a question? Mr. Gotti?
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on the question that was just asked in the Q&A, I had a similar one with respect to the town centers. You know, obviously this document was largely crafted pre-pandemic. And so given the sort of disproportionate impact on restaurants and hospitality, do we want to make any modifications that acknowledge that what we really need is a healthy ecosystem that draws that foot traffic that you talked about, Jack? I mean, certainly would love to see more restaurants and cafes, but I think we want to make sure that we maintain the balance of what that looks like to maintain a healthy ecosystem.
You're talking about an economic ecosystem, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Any other comments on town centers?
Yeah, I had one. So on TC2, it says collaborate with school department, school committee if school property becomes available. Doesn't that then fall under the jurisdiction of the select board?
It does, and we received a comment from the select board when we made the presentation to them on that point. And I think all we were trying to say, and I think that we'll work on a rewording of that, Chris. All we were trying to say is that there are a number of objectives in this plan that could benefit from the possibility that there would be surplus property owned by the town, and that extends to if it were to be a school property near a town center, it could be used to expand the town center, not necessarily commercially, but expand the opportunity for a community center, or it could be for or moderately priced housing. A lot of communities, one way of getting the price of housing down is to subsidize the land cost, basically by using municipal property or land trust property or something like that. And there was just a number of ideas in the plan. And so when the select board and the town meeting were to go to make that decision, we would hope that the plan would be referred to see what the plan thought would be possible uses. But yes, I mean, ultimately the decision is the select board and the town meeting.
Yeah, I think maybe if you just change wording to establish that you're collaborating with the select board or working with select board if school property becomes surplus, town surplus land. I don't think you have to change the sentiment of TC2. I think it just needs to be accurate that you're not working with the school department at that point.
That's a good point. Thank you.
I see what TC6 and 11 both refer to making pedestrian accessibility connections. Is there a way that could be reworded and just turned into one, or are they really two distinct sentiments? And again, you don't have to answer that right now, just something to think about. I had a question, and it comes up here, and it came up in the first one in land use. In 5 different sections that I counted, I may have missed some others, although I don't think I did. In this example, TC 12 is almost exactly the same as land use 11, and economic and development 16, and natural and cultural resources 10, and 13 and 14 of, I forget which other one, all talking about formalizing the planning board review process. And you were on the board, you know what that process is. To what are you referring when you say formalize the planning board review process?
A design review process?
Yeah.
Yeah. there was a lot of discussion on this, and in some of those sections you're referring to, we used different language for it. In some cases, it was more prescriptive that we were recommending that the planning board establish a design review process outside the planning board's own jurisdiction, meaning, as many communities do, there's a design review committee. We didn't go that route because that is something that is a fairly big step, and the planning board does do some design review in association with its review of commercial development, and that's really what we're talking about, commercial development. So it was a matter of formalizing was just a word that was chosen to not suggest a particular way of doing it, but maybe making the process that you have now a little bit more transparent to somebody who may be confronted with it. So if you looked at design review guidelines that other communities have, there are, and they range from being fairly general to being very specific. But what they do is that they give the planning board something against which they're judging a proposed commercial development, and it gives the proponents of commercial development some idea up front what the community is looking for, and that's what we're talking about. Just putting on paper the qualities that the town would consider appropriate.
So this happens to be in the town center section.
Right.
It refers to it in numerous other parts of this. Are you saying it would be done by the planning board or a separate committee, kind of like the permanent building committee does something else?
We couldn't agree on that. So some towns do it with a separate committee, and those are towns who I would have to say very much appreciate the quality of design in their communities. Other towns feel that's overstepping, that it's another review process that the commercial developer has to survive. And it seemed to us, in my experience on the planning board in past years, is that wasn't necessarily something that the town would be willing to do. That it might be there are all kinds of places on the continuum that you would come down on that, from just having some advisory guidelines written up as rules for the planning board to putting something into the bylaw that talks more about design expectations.
So this could be a fairly significant alteration to our current special permit process for certain areas. If somewhere on High Street were to be redeveloped, this would be a change from what we're used to. And I think the reason, I had a sense of what you were alluding to when I was reading this throughout the document, but I'm concerned about what we're agreeing to, this being a planning board document, if we don't really know what this is.
Right.
So I'm not against the idea of having maybe an architectural design review process or something along those lines. But I think if this is a recurring theme, it's happening at least in 5 of the 9 sections. So I think we need, and again, I'm not against the idea, but I think we need a better handle on what is this we're putting out there. And if we want to keep it kind of open-ended, then I guess that's what we can do. But maybe the planning board needs to discuss this aspect of this this document. And
Steve, did you want to Steve going off?
Yeah. So I was on the planning board for a few years, and this kept coming up quite often. And we would be reviewing things, and what we actually did this for the originally for Westwood Station, we had our architect come up with architectural guidelines, and he came up with a very nice booklet. When we went to University Station, we didn't formally adopt it, but they pretty much followed those original guidelines. So they were all written down. The problem is, and it happens in a lot of planning board things, is developers come in and and it's nice for them to know in advance what to expect, what the town is looking for in the general design of something. And if it's written down, it's a set of guidelines, then they have something better to go on, rather than just coming in and then individual members of the planning board say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And sometimes it varies from year to year with the planning board. So it'd be nice to actually establish those guidelines. So some of the obvious things, as I've said before, well, if you're going to use brick, you use red brick, not yellow brick, and that sort of thing. Things that they can know in advance and have them set up. And so since we've done it before for commercial areas like the University Avenue area, we thought it'd be also good to extend that to the town centers.
And I think our role in it was just maybe what you're seeing, Chris, is that it was talked about so much during the process by the people who participated that that's how it ended up in all these sections.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar question to Chris, and I think that, what you were trying to achieve with the way I read the language was this was a true suggested implementing action without being prescriptive about how to do it. And the fact that it appeared in all of those different sections of the document was reflective of those are the areas of the document that would benefit from that. So I had a similar question. It's good to hear your explanation on it. And I think you're right, Chris. I think that becomes something that we as a planning board have to take forward and consider.
Yeah, we would agree.
All right, thanks. Any other town center questions? Does anyone want any public questions? Anyone like to be recognized? Or there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. They were about COVID. All right. Shall we move on to the housing section? Jack, you want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah, I was waiting for Abby to change the slide.
Oh, sorry.
So housing, the section definitely benefited from the fact that there was a housing production plan done about a year earlier and approved by the planning board. So that section picks up on both in the background section and the recommendations reflect some of the work that was done in that housing production plan. The focus here is on as it had been in the 2000 plan, continuing to increase the availability and diversity of the housing stock in the town. And by that we meant, different styles of housing, whether it was single family homes, apartments, condominiums, senior housing, rental units, attached style housing, just to continue to work towards diversifying the type of housing, because the type of housing fits different people's situations in terms of where they are in their life cycle and so forth. And the idea being that we want to make sure that seniors aren't driven out of town, that they have other housing options in the community, or that our children, as they become adults, also might have housing opportunities as well. We also see it as a way of increasing the economic and racial diversity of the community. And some of the proposals in there suggest using zoning incentives when we're talking about private development, and potentially some town resources when we're talking about underwriting moderately priced housing. So there's a number of recommendations that talk about accessory apartments, maybe raising the cap on that, continuing our efforts to reduce the number of tear downs and rebuilds in our neighborhoods, extending the FMUOD that applies to High Street, maybe to some other sections of High Street, commercial sections, not residential sections, increasing density bonus in the OSRD, and that sort of thing. So there are 11 implementing actions in that section.
All right. Anyone with housing comments? Yes, Ms. Conant.
After reading through the document, I found that one of the most frustrating and concerning barriers to us as the planning board has been the lack of documentation as to where we stand on housing units. And I think as an action plan, we should really work on trying to calculate the housing units and the affordable housing. Because to come before us for every meeting and say we have somewhere between 9 and 21, we're short between 9 and 21 units, that's kind of embarrassing. And we should have something in place to accurately give us an idea as to where we stand on our housing units. And if we can come up with a program or some sort of a system to do that, especially with the 2020 census, though it will be delayed, that we really need to keep track of these, because that's going to influence the direction of the town.
Mr.
Oh, I
Chairman,
also have a
this is
comment.
Nora Lockdane. Could I just address that comment? I think there's a misunderstanding of where we are in housing. We do have a very firm grasp. We know exactly how many units of housing are in our town, and we know exactly how many affordable units there are in the town. The reason we give a range of where we may or may not be short come the 2020 census is that those numbers aren't in yet. And since the numbers aren't in, we're not sure how certain units will be calculated. The Census Bureau is tasked with determining what is a housing unit and what is not. And there's some flexibility there. We don't know yet how assisted living units will be counted, and we don't know yet how accessory units will be counted. So at last count, we could be fully capable of covering all of our 10% needs, or we could be short. As of today, looking at the number of housing units that we have, if we only include straight housing units, not including assisted living units and not including accessory apartments, we have a need that's 2 units greater than what is currently on the subsidized housing inventory. We have about 8 units that are in production to be added to the subsidized housing inventory. We have another 8 units that are in pre-production and hopefully will be added within the next year. If we look at all of the units that are now assisted living units, those that exist and those that are in construction, and we look at accessory apartments as well, if those are counted by the Census Bureau as standard housing units, then our need could be as high as 19. In that event, since we have 8 ready to be listed on the SHI and 8 in production, we could be 3 units short. So it's all a question of what the Census Bureau counts, when they count it, and we simply won't know that until the numbers come through. So there's nothing more that the town can do on its end to count the units. We have a firm count of all of our units, and that information is always available.
I think though it's that for a time they were recording the number of apartments at the Gables, that had been rented and everything. And I think there's no doubt that the numbers exist, but I think what we're looking for, if we could track these more visibly somehow or know kind of, because it does feel like we always can find out the information at the next hearing, but there's no trend or there's no sense of, what these metrics really, what they are over time. I don't know if that's not to, Ms. Conant, is that kind of what you were getting at, or?
Yeah, and I think that it's best to err on the side of caution. I mean, we know that some towns count accessory apartments, some towns don't. So if we err on the side of caution, give us a better idea, it would help prepare us better to know where we stand affordability wise. And instead of waiting for the 2020 census, I mean, it's like playing Russian roulette. Let's err on the side of caution. Let's be ahead of the game, and let's just try to get some numbers that are more that give us a better idea as to where we know affordability wise.
So I believe that's what we are doing in giving a range. I believe that's what we have always done. We're always working to achieve affordable housing in any project we're able to do that with. We have amended our bylaw over the years to ensure that all special permit housing now has an affordability requirement, and we're plugging away at it. We've created quite a few affordable units over the years, and we're continuing to look into the future to create more. And we always give a range for what the maximum need will be. And at present, that maximum need is 19 units.
Also on page 7 of 9 under H2, You have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It is not a trust fund. It's just a fund. There's a big difference there, so that needs to be removed.
Okay. Will do.
Let's see, other housing comments? Chris, are you raising your hand? Or no, okay.
Sorry about that. On H1A, it says identify, prioritize, and zone town-owned properties appropriate for moderately priced residences should they become available. It sounds more, that's a directive, and it's presupposing that the town is choosing to turn that land into housing. Maybe we can reword that a little bit to, work with, as we talked about the last time, work with town officials, select board, whatever, to identify the best use of this land, or I don't know. It just seems, I know we're in the housing section, but it just seems a little presumptuous that available town land will be turned into housing, because it says identify, prioritize, and zone.
Fair comment.
So I just have one more comment, Dave. As far as the fund, maybe we want to pursue putting it into a trust to make it more protective rather than have it in the general fund. And that way there it will be specifically allocated for the affordable housing. A lot of towns have them in trust funds. I'm not sure why we don't, but that might be something we might want to pursue.
So would that be in the form of a recommendation, or basically saying to segregate the funds that are intended to support affordable housing?
I think it would be under an act. One of the implementing actions is to revert it to a trust fund versus having it just in a fund, because the trusts are run differently than the funds.
All right. Other comments, board members? All right. There's some Q&A ones, but I had a comment on housing also, and so I noticed that one of the things I was concerned about with housing is the racial diversity in the town, and so there's some progress or some changes. The town is becoming more diverse. I noticed that it was mentioned in here that from 20 years ago, it was a 96% white population. And that has changed as more people of Asian background have moved into town, and there is an evolving demographic in town. But as we've seen in some of the other reports we have, the surprising number for me is that the Black population in Westwood is shockingly low. In our open space plan, there's the statistics are there from the American Community Survey 2016, that according to that statistic, it said there are 42 individuals in Westwood, and I've seen other numbers that are like 0.7%. But the fact of the matter is that the town is not like other towns. The towns like Dover and Norwood, Dedham, all around us have larger Black populations, and I think that there is an approach number 3 says provide educational outreach and regular diversity training to local entities such as real estate agents and local employers. But I don't think that that's adequate enough to address the historical impact of the exclusionary practices that are reflected in the current population. I mean, it's not it's a much larger issue here, but I do think it's something that it is a part of the plan. I think it should be a part of thinking about what we want the future of the community to be. Recognizing it's not individuals, it's not, that real estate agents are racist or something. It's just that why do we have such a low Black population in the town? And wouldn't we as a town want to do something to make our town more racially diverse, and that it would benefit everyone to do that? It's a difficult topic, I think, to address, but it is something that I think a lot of people in town have been more sensitized to recently, obviously with the things that happened this past year. And so I just wondered if there was some way, if we felt that could be included as a part of some addressing that, recognizing this and addressing it as a part of the comprehensive plan. So I don't know if
No, no, it wasn't. We agree with you, and I think we just need to figure out what those those things could be. And there's no one was suggesting that this is the responsibility of the real estate agents. I think that the training or the exposure to the a greater training or exposure to the idea was what we were talking about broadly, to get the community to discuss this.
Well, and I think some sort of incentivization, like some promotion, like to say, we know that we are a welcoming community. We know that this is a great place to live, and we should be marketing that and promoting it and thinking of possible incentives to get people of color to buy houses in Westwood. We talk about housing and affordable housing, and sort of it's one of the arguments is that we need with more affordable housing because it's a lot of people can't afford to live here, and the proportion of people who can't afford to live here, it's a much wider population. So over time, if you have more affordable housing, you might increase the diversity, but it's a tiny amount. And I think that in terms of what the future of the community looks like, it would take it takes something more than just eliminating to having fair housing practices, to diversity sort of education, but actually to actively promote and encourage and just acknowledge the situation and say that we want to become a more welcoming community. So I guess we agree with the idea, but it's hard to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, it seems to me as a possibility to work closer with Sarah in the housing production plan, and not so much in this document, but working with our housing agent on those, boots on the ground approach, and how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? We have that in place. We've already approved it. It seems like it's an easier step to just work with Sarah and figure out how do we implement this, because a lot of this that we're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but isn't it also represented in the HPP? Did you take a lot of this from that?
We did.
It's already there. And I think we as a planning board can work with Sarah, and we just had a housing meeting where we talked about additional training for boards within town with regard to housing and fair housing. So that was something that we discussed in our meeting there. And so I think acknowledgement has been done, and now it's time to work on the goals and implementing them into our town. So I only bring that up just as a member of the housing partnership. It is identified not just in this document, but in the housing production plan. So I think that's an area we can work towards immediately in implementing that goal.
I do recall years ago there was an interdenominational group along with some other people in the town that used to meet and discuss this topic. And I see a comment that somebody made about recommending a task force to address racial inequality might be as powerful a recommendation as ours, talking about training of officials and people involved in community development. So I think that that's a reasonably good idea.
Thanks, Jack. I want to go back to the questions here. I realize that I've not been consistent with sort of reading all the questions off of here. And so, first of all, if there's anyone who wants to be recognized for public comment on this, if they could press *9 on the phone or indicate that in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to just go to some of these. We'll just read the questions so that it's on the record here. So there was a question: how does the town track the affordable housing units when one's salary exceeds the affordability?
This is Nora. I can answer that. The affordable units in town that are rental units are annually recertified by each of the landlords. So the property owner every year has to submit to the housing agent a recertification that looks at the income level of each household that is in an affordable rental unit. For affordable home ownership units, it's different. For those units, the affordability requirement is only put into play at the time of the lottery for the sale of the home ownership units. And then when those units are put up for sale again, then the new owners are required to meet the affordability goals. But if you have an affordable ownership property, you qualify when you purchase it, and that's it. You don't have to qualify again. If you're in an affordable rental property, you have to qualify on an annual basis.
All right. It's interesting. I see that some of the questions are getting answered by other people in the Q&A, but I see that Kathy Shinopoulos wants to make a comment. So can we unmute her?
Yep, just a moment. All right.
Hi.
Kathy, yep.
Hi. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a committee in town, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but there is a diversity committee in town. And I think the one that Jack mentioned that existed a number of years ago, there's been some talk off and on about reviving that through the Neighbors in Action group. Of course, now, because of COVID, we're not as active as we used to be. But as I said, there is a diversity committee that working on different diversity issues, including sexual orientation and so forth. They've been involved recently in Black Lives Matter demonstrations and so on. But it would be good to expand that if possible, or get more people involved. As far as the affordable, increasing the diversity in the community, I think it really is important for people to have the training and awareness. But I think the key thing is which is listed on this housing comprehensive plan, is to diversify the housing stock. If we are to assume that African Americans have lower income, which is a fair assessment, I think we need to provide an opportunity for them to have housing in Westwood. If they, there isn't a way to attract people to come into a town that they can't afford to live in. So I think that would be a top priority. And of course, going along with that is, whatever we have to do zoning wise to make sure we can increase the stock of rental units and all these other types of housing that are mentioned in the comprehensive plan. So I'm probably repeating what other people have said already, but I just want to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public questions or comments? All right, let's proceed to the next section. Abby, you want to move to the next slide, and we'll chat. Go to economic development.
Okay, this section's goals and recommendations recognize that the financial strength of local businesses and industry to support the town's overall financial health, the high quality of our public services and educational system, and it underpins, our residents' quality of life. So the recommendations refer to maximizing the town's commercial tax base by pursuing desired types of development in the different commercial locations. And of course, the desired type are different in the different commercial locations. Again, strengthen the town centers as places to shop, dine, and mingle by encouraging a mix of local retail and services. And there are 20 separate recommendations in this section.
Dave, you're muted.
It's like I think I muted myself and then talked. So if there's anyone who would like to comment, raise your hand or jump in, board members. Yes, Ms. Khan, you are muted.
just in the description under page 3 of 7 under economic development, under Islington, it states a relocated, renovated, and expanded Wentworth. Since it's going to be a rebuild, we should probably just change that to a rebuild rather than a relocated, because it looks like the building was demolished. I'm really not sure what's going on with it. But just to make sure that it just doesn't seem like we're not being transparent here. I just want to change those words. I believe that's what the RFP said too. It was a rebuild, not a relocate.
I think what they've done is they've taken a few walls down or sections and they'll be put back up, surrounded by a whole new building.
It's
I
still
think that's all that remained, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing I have to ask is, you know, when we ask a lot of questions and then we don't get any, we get kind of like radio silence. So do we get like, you know, do the residents or us get like, you know, yes, we hear you, or what's going to happen? We're going to do these edits or not going to do these edits? So, I mean, where do we stand with these?
Abby, do you want to go over the process here? Like, I'm assuming there's a lot of, like, the select board too, lots of
Right.
comments and-
Sorry. Yep. I've been answering. I thought, you know, I explained it in my summary and Dave explained in the beginning of the meeting. Yes, we're taking notes. This is for you to provide, everyone to provide comments tonight. And then at the end of the night, the recommendation is to continue to your next meeting on December 1st. So everyone to get me, you know, your comments tonight or as soon as you can afterwards, so that I can prepare and update a new red line track changes version. So if you could get me your edits, you know, some people, you know, some things you talked about tonight, but if you also notice other things or, you know, any kind of typos or edits you might mention, to get them to me, and then I'll work on creating an updated draft. I'd recommend if you can try to have them in the next few days. I would suggest Tuesday. That way I can try to get you a completed updated version in your packet and post it out on the website. Depending on how many, I would like to have that posted on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So that would be my goal, if everyone can provide any further edits by Tuesday. But yes, I'm taking notes here so that after tonight, we'll work on a next edited version to get back to for your next hearing on December 1st.
And so that's like, that would be a redlined, you'd be able to generate a redline version for that, so that, and
Right.
publish that on the website with the meeting information, so that anyone who wants to look at that can see everything that was deleted and added from what we received this time.
Right, and the select board, they started their review, but they have a meeting next week as well. So I expect after that meeting, they'll get us more edits. So probably up until Wednesday, I'll be, you know, compiling all these edits. So I'm hoping for Wednesday to be able to get an updated draft distributed to the planning board, to the steering committee, and posted on the website and with the agenda.
So is there anybody else with comments on economic development? Any public comments, any Q&A? I'm not seeing any questions there. And I'm looking at everybody to see no one's excited, so okay. Abby, you want to move to the next slide then? And we'll talk about natural and cultural resources.
Mm-hmm. In this section, natural and cultural resources and the open space and recreation section, which are two separate sections of the plan, also benefited from the work that was done on the open space and recreation plan that was approved by the planning board a year ago, and reflect the direction that those plans established, as well as what we heard during our process. And so there were 35 recommendations in this section, and they have to do with both natural resources, the live resources, as also the cultural resources. And we had people working on this section from the historic side of things, as well as natural resources. So if you look through them, you'll see the recommendations all support protecting the natural resources, the cultural resources, and the historic resources in the community, and encouraging rehabilitation of the historic resources that we have. This section also picks up on a theme that we heard a lot about, increasing community cohesion and community gathering through cultural activities. In other words, more of a programmatic kind of statement. We heard there was a lot of discussion about the cohesiveness of the community, and a lot of the recommendations throughout this plan try to address that in some ways. And in this case, in this section, it talks about the idea that cultural activities and programming could contribute to that a great deal. The other major theme here is to improve access to the town's open spaces. As I said, there are 35 separate recommendations here. I think this is divided into historic and natural resources sections, or cultural resources.
All right, thanks, Jack. I'm just going to pop back to, I saw a question in the Q&A that it's back to the other thing. So
sure.
E6 discusses the Islington redevelopment. How can we support restaurants, coffee shops when we no longer own the buildings?
Would you like me to take that one, Dave?
Yeah, Nora, if you want to.
So we would support them in Islington Center, in High Street, in University Station, in the same manner. Actually, to date, there's been no town-owned building that while the town owned it, they used it for a restaurant or a coffee shop, and that would have been very unlikely had we continued to own buildings that we were looking to have turned to those uses. So the way we support this type of business, and any type of business, is through our zoning bylaw, through our design requirements, through the way that the planning board reviews applications for changes of use. And we do that by coordinating the type of uses needs for parking and our parking requirements, the uses needs for outdoor areas, for seating, for display, for signage, and the needs of the business. So we will continue to look at our zoning bylaw, look at our design requirements and qualitative standards within the zoning bylaw, and discuss with the planning board when businesses come to the planning board for a change of use approval, how we can get those businesses that we like and assist them to be successful in the area. We also work with all of Westwood's businesses, and including most recently all of the food establishments, to make sure that they can survive in these COVID times. So the planning board has made it clear to businesses that they're willing to help where they need help. The select board has as well, and the select board has actually made a lot of concessions in their licensing to make it easier for businesses to have outdoor areas. They've reduced fees for the coming year, again, to assist them. And we maintain a constant conversation with our businesses and our proposed businesses to make sure that the town is giving them the opportunity to thrive and prosper in Westwood. And we treat the businesses that we're interested in having come in a more friendly manner than the businesses that we are not interested. So for instance, we hear every now and then from someone who wants to run a smoke shop or a cigar bar, and we don't adjust our zoning to allow those type of uses because we don't think that they add to our local business districts. Coffee shops, we've amended our zoning to make them more likely to come. So we just keep looking at it case by case basis and doing all we can to encourage the type of businesses we hope to bring to our town centers.
Thanks, Nora. And I think it's good to have that detail as we talk about these things. How do we support businesses? Those are some examples. We don't have to own the property to do things. I think waiving or reducing the relicensing fees was another thing that you mentioned at the last meeting that had been done to help some of the restaurants in town. Just these are all things that it's obvious to people that are doing it, I guess, but it's not obvious to everybody when it says like support the businesses, what that means. And I think it's very helpful to have those kind of details in a plan. So are there questions or comments on the natural and cultural resources? Yes, let's comment.
So I'm just going back to page 4 of 8 for the clarification of the Obed Baker House. I know that we spent, I think it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to refurb that, and that they're trying to find a new use for it. I recently heard a rumor that it was sold or that it's under agreement. I don't know if there's any way to verify that and whether that would mean that it would be removed from this plan or not. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any way that you could contact maybe the BOS or kind
Dave,
of.
but I can speak to that one as well. The Obed Baker House, the town did not spend money on renovating that property. The Westwood Historical Society years ago owned the property, and they put quite an investment in to build an appropriate foundation. The building was moved. They replaced windows. They did a lot of work to return the building as much as possible to its historic status, and they were continuing to do that, but we're running out of funds. At some point, the town received ownership of the property from the Historical Society, and the town has 3 times put out the property with a request for proposals for a bid. And most recently, we did that just over a year ago, and we did receive a proposal. And we're waiting for the applicant who submitted the proposal to finalize plans. And when those plans are finalized, they'll be brought before the select board for consideration. And then if it's a successful plan and the select board agrees to sell it to this person, then it will come before the planning board for a review for what they'd like to do. So that's in progress right now, but on the 3rd try, the RFP was successful, and we do have a potential purchaser.
Dave, I have a question in addition to the Obed Baker House. The Wentworth Hall, is it going to be renamed across the street, or is it no longer really going to be? Because if it's not, there's nothing there in our town to identify it. So I don't even know if it warrants a suggestion in this document. It's all of these buildings are still in our town, but if the Wentworth Hall if the new building's not going to be renamed Wentworth Hall or something like that, or I don't know what.
The new building is Wentworth Hall. So we have relocated the old Wentworth Hall, the 3 walls that we had intended to use in the new structure. Our original plan was to lift up the building and take it apart when we got it across the street, so that we would reuse the front and 2 side walls, remove the roof, the rear wall, and the flooring, so that we could reuse it as part of an expanded building. It was determined that it was more effective, more cost effective, and just more, from an engineering standpoint, made more sense to, rather than move the structure and disassemble it once it got across the street, we disassembled it first and moved the portions across the street where they'll be reassembled. It will be Wentworth Hall. The front of the building will look like the old Wentworth Hall because it will be the exterior structure. Instead of vinyl cladding, it will have the original style of wood cladding that it originally had. It'll have a new roof that resembles the old roof from the original structure, and it will look like Wentworth Hall. There'll be a large addition on the back, and it'll be sitting on a full basement that has a community room on the lower level, but it will absolutely be Wentworth Hall.
Thanks for clearing that up. I appreciate it. I did have 2 other comments on the implementing actions for natural and cultural resources. Number 34, explore the feasibility of recreating the historic Blue Heart Tavern. Was the suggestion to rebuild the Blue Heart? Or is this a holdover from when that building still existed? Anyone?
So
I think that there was tremendous disappointment when the Blue Heart Tavern was demolished, and a lot of passion in the town to do something to restore the Blue Heart Tavern, even if it's build a replica of it. I think there are people who are in favor of doing that, and that's what this speaks to.
Got it. And my other comment is really maybe just a typo identify. NC 32, complete the historic rehabilitation and reuse of the Obed Baker House to ensure its preservation. I think the word there is ensure, E-N, not I-N.
It is.
Okay.
But Dave, if I could just go back to NC 34 about the Blue Heart Tavern. I know the planning board and historical commission, a lot of people, we were trying to work on saving that building for a long time as part of the Islington Center redevelopment project. The planning board did secure, land and space for renovating that historic building and wanted to see it kept. However, that didn't happen. So so as of now, there's no land for the Blue Heart Tavern to be recreated on Washington Street in Islington Center. You know, so we had tried to work with that, but now with the Wentworth Hall renovation and the community building, that area is where the Blue Heart Tavern is, and there'll be a landscaped area out front. So I don't know that this recommendation is, you know, really feasible now or as written, because you would need to find new land for it to be recreated. So the cost of creating the building and finding a new location for it as well.
I guess my response to that is Mr. Petruzziello had committed to having land available for it.
So what happened there was land that was set aside, and of the parcel that was given to the town. When Blue Heart Tavern was determined to not be feasible for renovating that, first the way the planning board decision was written and the land disposition agreement was written, Giorgio Petruzziello, as the developer, had the first right to move and restore or reuse that building for his own purposes. If he chose not to, the town had a right to do the same. And if the town chose not to, then any private party who was interested had the right to bid on it. So what happened was Petruzziello determined that it was not feasible to reuse that building. The town had no interest and no funding to reuse the building. And we put it out for many different proposals to see if we could find anyone else. We actually had a couple of people who thought they were initially interested, but upon review determined that it just wasn't economically feasible to do that. So while we were considering that, we had taken a piece of the Wentworth Hall lot and designated it separately as a section that would go right up against the street where the Blue Heart Tavern would go. When the Blue Heart Tavern was demolished, that area was subsumed into the Wentworth Hall parcel and is being reused as a landscaped area. We heard throughout the process that residents were looking for additional open space, and that's the area that we are giving back as more open space, a more usable space in front of Wentworth Hall. We were doing our best to try and find a place to save Blue Heart Tavern. Had we put it there, it absolutely would have been shoehorned in. It still would have been great to be able to preserve it if it was a feasible engineering feat and economic feat to do so. When it was determined that it couldn't be saved, though, the building where where Wentworth Hall was going to be moved to was adjusted so that it best fits the site and has the greatest opportunity for open space. So at this point, now that that building foundation is already in place and the building is on its way into vertical construction, there's no longer room there for the Blue Heart Tavern. So if the town was looking to create that somewhere else, that would require a funding program and the identification of land. So I will point out the Blue Heart Tavern, its former owner, when it was one of the Magaletta properties, and the Petruzziellos were first working with them to purchase that property, they were looking for places all around Islington Center where they could move it. They talked to Roach Brothers about acquiring a parcel that they had. They talked to the owner of property right next to 321 Washington Street to see if they might be interested in selling their lot. And I believe they even looked further north on Route 1A. But there just was no land that anyone was willing to part with at a reasonable price. So it's an obstacle. And I just think that if that goal remains in the plan, it ought to recognize that obstacle of finding a place where the Blue Heart Tavern could go.
Does anyone, I have a suggestion for this, for the plan here. And I mean, it's just, if we are serious about protecting these resources, we need a more forceful position in terms of the plan. I mean, this is the place to change things, because that process of everyone trying to save that building or whatever, it failed, and it was inevitable that it was going to fail, really, looking back over things now, because as private property, there was no protection for it. There's another house on Washington Street. I think it was 75 or 90, somewhere down there. That was a 300-year-old house. It was even older than the Blue Heart. Now it's a two-family with a big garage. The point is that we refuse to adopt a lengthy historical demolition delay bylaw. We apparently have a historic district on High Street here, but I don't know that it imposes any restrictions on homes because I live in it, and I don't think there's any restriction on what I can do to this house. And I think that if the comprehensive plan is going to seriously say that we should protect these historic structures, it needs to be much more forceful. It needs to talk about changing the ability of individuals to do things with their properties. And because that's the thing, the town did not own the Blue Heart Tavern. And so all these things were done to try to fix it. But the minute it was moved off that property, it was no longer possible to be designated as a National Historic Landmark or anything. And that's the thing, we move these buildings around. I'm just saying that, can we think of something in this plan that changes the playing field a little bit more, that changes it to say, we're going to recognize that a 300-year-old structure, privately owned, we're going to make it really hard for the owners of that building to tear it down. And I don't think that we have a serious commitment right now in our bylaws to do that. So
yeah, I think we'd have to address it through a bylaw change, not through this document. This document would just bring it up as a priority.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, if the objective is to rebuild the Blue Heart Tavern, that's like that is after the fact, like trying to
that's not even part of the preserving anything. It's just honoring it with a memorial, a recreation building.
And there's a house down the street here, it's built in 1680, I think. And so I don't know, I mean, obviously how do we protect stuff like that? I mean, that's what it should be about, is like, how do we protect the really old historic properties in town? But
Well, I agree. Our demolition delay bylaw has only been in effect for 2 years, and we would like to come before the town and ask for the demolition period to be extended from 6 months to a year. 6 months is a very short period of time, and a year would give us more flexibility. And I'd like to connect with other towns, like Hingham, for example, that have had demolition bylaws in effect for a while, and they've been successful in protecting and preserving their historic properties. And I really would like to see Westwood be successful in that same way.
Nancy, I agree with you, and I think that might be included in the action plan for this. Also, too, we need to close that gap, as Nora said, that the Obed Baker was the Historic Society property and not the town. So I would have thought that you two are on the same page, the Historic Commission and the town. So to say that it was your money that went into it versus the town, we need to close that gap and kind of form a unity. If we continue to just demolish all of our history, we're not going to have anything left in Westwood. So we really need to close that gap, and that needs to be in the action plan as well. So maybe there's something that you can come up with to put in here for some action plans for that.
Just a point of clarification, the Westwood Historical Society is not the Westwood Historical Commission.
Right.
The Westwood Historical Commission is an appointed body, appointed by the Select Board, and that's the body that's responsible for overseeing the demolition delay bylaw. The Westwood Historical Society is a private organization, not connected with the town. And it was the Westwood Historical Society that previously owned the Obed Baker house.
I still think that they could close that gap and work together. It doesn't have to be a separate entity. They can work together in collaboration. That's what makes a community, is by working together rather than separating them. So
and working together is exactly what was accomplished by the town taking the property back from the Westwood Historical Society when they were unable to preserve it on their own. So I think there is a very strong working relationship there.
And selling it. So.
Let's see, are there any other board member or panelist comments? There's some more questions in the Q&A. I'm just pausing to see if anybody's raising their hand or anything. But Um, let's see. So just looking at the questions in the Q&A. Let's see. So I'll just start. So from Fran Fusco, will Wentworth Hall still be historic?
I'm not sure what the question refers to it being historic. It's an old building. It has significant local history in the way it's been used over the years. That has not changed. If you're asking if it'll still be eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, moving the building makes it ineligible for listing, no matter what manner it's moved in. Doesn't change the fact that it's still locally historic. And in the case of Wentworth Hall, it was the use of the building, not the architecture, that was significant, and that historic use remains in effect.
Her next question was, why can't it be placed on Washington Street? Was there not room for it when it was promised to the residents?
So I think I already answered that. So there was a small section of land that was identified as on a plan as a place to put it, where it would have been shoehorned in between the Northeast Security Building and the new Wentworth Hall. It would have been a possibility, but it would have been less open space. So once a decision was made that the building could not be moved and that there was no one interested in moving it, and it was demolished, then it no longer made sense to save that space for any other use. And so that space became part of the Wentworth Hall lot.
All right, thanks, Nora. I'm just looking there. So Sandra says, I'm asking because I don't know what that refers to. So maybe if you could re-ask that question. And then a question from NMF. I recall during several past planning board meetings, board members adamantly recommended removal of all references to the Community Preservation Act, the CPA. Yet to date, those references remain. Were the members' comments deliberately ignored?
I can take a start at that. Charlie Donahue worked on that. He might want to answer as well, as might Abby McCabe. But what happened was not that the request was to remove references to the CPA. The request, which was honored, was to identify the CPA and note that there was no recommendation in the plan to pursue adoption of the CPA. The recommendation was rather to investigate the possibility. And that was something that was supported by the select board and the planning board.
That's right. I think we did a lot of different comments on it. I think the bottom line was there's already about 180 towns have adopted it. The towns we compete with athletically, the towns we compete with academically have been in it for 15 and 20 years and have built things that are quite impressive. Our recommendation is we set up a committee to study it, to look into it. What's the benefits? What's the negative aspects of it? And through that process, should we then decide to go and recommend it before the select board and the town meeting. But it's really because so many other towns we compete with who have good fields, fix up their buildings, that we really need to study it in depth with a lot of input from a lot of people. And all we're suggesting here is that we need to get on board and start looking into it to see if it's appropriate for us today. So that's all we're recommending.
All right.
Dave, and I would just add, we did talk, it was more in the open space and recreation section where we give some background context to what the CPA is. And then it appears in a couple of different sections in natural and cultural resources and the housing and open space section about investigating and considering looking into it. So it has been modified since the planning board last saw this at your first draft.
All right,
I still think we need to be really cautious about the CPA, especially with the financial crisis on the state and federal funding, that if we go ahead and push this through, then any projects we, commit to that we'll be responsible for, even if there is no funding under the CPA. So we have to be very, very cautious about how we word this and how we use this as an implementing action, even if it's just possible.
we envision to study this as about a 4 to 5 year project. Okay, we're not doing anything immediately. We'll be out of COVID by then, but it's to begin to sit down and seriously look at the benefits of it. What have all these other towns that have done it? Have they benefited? Are they happy? We're probably talking 3, 4, 5 years before we even think about implementing it. That's the time frame that's realistic.
But aren't some of the action plans in the matrix that you have with the questionable CPA under the 2-year term versus the long term? I mean,
The
we'd be-
objective is to simply study it, get into, after a period of probably 2 or 3 years of studying it with that input. We don't see it in the immediate future. It's just we haven't really, as a town, spent the time studying it in detail the way we should. And there's an awful lot to be learned out there from the towns that have already done it.
Right, we have it in the, for NC 23 in the matrix, in the implementation matrix, it's listed as medium term, which is the 3 to 5 years range. So when you get to that, you can look at all the other, where it appears in some other sections, the planning board should take a look at what's listed as a priority.
And Abby, just point of clarification, when you look at that matrix, when you put something in that time frame, that is oftentimes when things should begin and not necessarily be completed by, correct?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the length of time depends on, how long and, resources and
Correct.
what's available at that moment in time.
All right, thanks, Abby. There's another question here, another statement from NMF. Residents want tax relief and is recently brought forward by a member of FinCom. The real percentages of annual property tax increases are buried in the annual warrant and have consistently been over and above Prop 2.5. FY16 was 2.9%, FY18 was 4.6%. Both FY20 and projected FY21 are at 3%. So that's the statement. The next item, and no one's responsive. The next item here is from Fran Fusco. The travesty here is we have lost 2 historic buildings in Islington. The developer and the town circulated propaganda that clearly showed the Blue Heart Tavern as a highlight of this project. People were sold on it with that as part of it. Very disappointing. Next comment, NMF says, who is we? Should a majority of residents were opposed and continue to be opposed now? Fran Fusco, never did we hear that the Blue Heart Tavern was being shoehorned in. Okay, so that's just, I'm just going to reading the comments there. And then now we have a different comment, which is a question from Vicky Macready's. As far as NC 20, what are the implications of designating a road as a scenic road? How does that impact goals for improving pedestrian access?
I can try to answer that as well. When you designate a road as a scenic road, you give the planning board the authority to review anything that changes the look within the right of way by removing significant trees or by changing or removing a stone wall, a larger than 14-foot section of a stone wall. So it affects the manner in which the properties along that road treat the area within the right of way. It preserves the look of the road. And so if you wanted to put a path, a sidewalk or a path behind a stone wall, if you were disturbing the stone wall or taking down trees in order to do that, significant trees, you would need planning board approval in order to do that. If a road is not a scenic road, then planning board approval is not a step along the way. Then it was simply reviewed by the select board as the road commissioners. So in a non-scenic road, it goes to the select board. In a scenic road, it goes to the planning board and the select board in the case of wanting to add pedestrian access.
All right, thanks, Nora, for responding. Mr. Gotti, do you have a question? Or go?
Yeah, there's NC 24 talks about creating a calendar of sorts. And I think there were some other similar types of comments that I wasn't sure were necessarily right for the document because they seem more administrative in terms of things the town could or should do. I think there was one that was similar in the economic development or town center section. And I guess my question is, are we feeling that there's an absence of adequate communication and promotion of these types of things, adequate organization of these types of events? So is the recommending action maybe not one to say, is there a need for a manager or director of communication on behalf of the town as opposed to, specifically saying there's a calendar? Because I think what a calendar doesn't necessarily recognize is the multifaceted media landscape of today. It used to be you could put something like that in a newspaper and you had a calendar of events. My question is sort of who would own this within the town, and then is there, a recommendation for how to improve that going forward? I don't doubt that we would benefit from something like that. It's not clear to me where this thing falls in its recommendation.
So there are a lot of things in the where we show there's a need and say, but we don't go into great detail on how we're going to solve it. And I think this is one of them, and it appears in a number of places. So we're just leaving it to the town to recognize that we have a communication problem. And with communication, particularly with the town, between the town and residents, you're only as good as your last communication. And so something you have to keep working at. So we didn't go into great detail here, but we just expressed what the need is.
I think Mr. Gotti has made a suggestion about what a potential solution to that would be, is to have somebody responsible for that function, which strikes me as a reasonable proposal.
Yeah, I would second that and it's again a much bigger topic, but certainly the communication and the materials, the town website. I mean, there's an ongoing need for making things easier to find and publicizing effectively a lot of the information that's out there. Anyone else wishing to comment here?
Dave, I see Sheila. Sheila has on the committee has her hand up. I think maybe she wanted to answer a question. Sheila, did you still have want to respond to an earlier question?
Actually, I'm having a problem putting anything in the chat. So basically, I just want to support the idea that we look at what other communities have done, whether it's about historical housing preservation or whether it's about how have other towns used community preservation acts to help create more things for their communities. It's very important that we look at some other models that are out there, and that even though, yes, we all understand the economic situation right now is going to be very tight, it does not mean that we shouldn't be exploring, educating ourselves, and so on. So it was just basic comments as well.
Thanks, Sheila. I see another comment from Claire Galkowski. Effective communication is increasingly challenging with our fragmented sources of information and erosion of local press.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially similar to the comment that I was making, and I would build on that to ask, when you were doing this section, was there consideration to the value of Westwood Media Center? Full disclosure, I'm also on the board of the Westwood Media Center, but in terms of its vital role in creating a well-engaged, informed community, and making sure that there were considerations for whether it's IT infrastructure, because video has become such a major part of the landscape, whether it be social media or Westwood Media or I think the town has really come to depend on it as a source of news, especially in these times of the pandemic. So just another thing that I was curious about as part of this cultural section.
You know, one thing I noticed when, especially in the visiting session, that you have to use all kinds of communication. There are new ways, but that doesn't mean you have to stop using the old ways, because there's always someone who's, you know, there are people that are still doing things the old-fashioned way, and you know they don't have. There's some people don't have computers, so when it comes to communication, you have to use all the methods that you have available, and certainly the Westwood Media Center is one of them. We can add that if you want to make reference. We've referenced them in a number of places. We can add more references if you point out where we should do that.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Abby, do you want to advance to the next slide, which is the next part of the plan, community facilities?
This section really captures the priorities of the town departments and the committees, as well as the residents' desires. So a lot of effort was made in interviewing department heads and town officials that have responsibility for the facilities that we're talking about, and then integrating that with what we heard from the town residents in terms of what they desired out of community facilities. So among the key actions we selected for this slide, a town hall renovation, that was a recommendation back in 2000 that there was understood that the town hall was not adequately sized for all of the activity that occurred there, and that should be expanded as well as being made accessible. That hadn't been done, and I think it becomes a priority this time around. Obviously, there's a elementary school building project going on now, and the plan was supporting that as it moved along. I don't think it's quite finished yet, so we don't say anything more definitive about that. That is in the hands of the school department, school committee in the town meeting. Town should be a leader in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And the idea there being, and I think the town has made many strides that, and we'll talk about that more in the sustainability section. But the town can lead the way on that. And then, as we heard in a number of sections, prioritizing sidewalk and pedestrian connections throughout town. And there are 34 implementing actions in that section.
Right, Ms. Conant.
Yeah, under CF 28, it states maintaining a water rate structure that will support capital improvement. How do you see that? Like, what would that look like?
I'm not sure I'm the right one to answer that question. Perhaps Tom would.
That was a recommendation that I think came through the town's water district, the Dedham Westwood Water District. And we were just piggybacking on that. They're pleased with the capital developments and the improvements that the town has made insofar as that they are able to support the water needs, but they just want to make sure that going forward that we coordinate with them and don't get too far out ahead of ourselves if we had another large project.
I just think it's something that should be defined. Like, what is a water rate structure? Just so people understand it more. Maybe we could sort of add that in.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Dave, I had a couple things. First off, CF6 says following the relocation and renovation of the Islington Branch Library, Wentworth Hall, and its expansion into community center, optimize the space for branch library services, including learning, individual and small group collaborative study for a multi-purpose public gathering place for the youth and family services and recreation departments. Isn't that already done in the design phase when they designed this building? Didn't they incorporate all these elements into it?
Yes, we did.
So does it need, it's been done. Why does it need to be on this as an action item?
I think the stakeholders were very concerned that the functions be listed. That's all I can speak to that. But they were very concerned that the branch libraries functions, youth and family services functions were listed so there'd be no confusion about what the building was going to be used for. I think they were, in part, they were responding to concerns from the Islington community.
Right, and when we first drafted this, it was a year, a year ago.
I get that.
We moved further along in the design when we first started drafting this.
It just seems like if it's been done, why is it still in there? And, to allay fears that it won't be done, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the right place for this.
I'll also point out, though, that the timing of the plan will hopefully be adopted prior to the completion of construction. So this plan is still in advance of Wentworth Hall opening up. We're looking at Wentworth Hall opening in July. So if you were to adopt this plan sometime in December, January, whenever it is, you still won't have the open Wentworth Hall. So so you're still asking for an action that hasn't been completed. It certainly has been designed that way.
Okay.
Every intention is for it to be used that way, but it hasn't been open to the public yet.
And speaking of that, going into the library and human services section of this section, it says the project will continue through 2020. I think it's quite possible that this process goes through till 2021. So that's an area, and it happens in a few other parts of this entire document where we refer to 2020 in a way that if it goes through like that, it needs to be changed. Because if we adopt it in 2021, saying a sentence like continue through to 2020 will obviously read inaccurate. So I think we need to go through the whole document. Anytime it says 2020, other than identifying like that was the population as of 2020 or something like that, I think it just needs to be changed to be completely accurate. And a little figure X, when I was reading senior center, figure X refers to senior center, but it doesn't refer to the information until you get to the next page, page 6. And you have to go back to page 5 to see what figure X is referring to. It's a little difficult to read. I just kept having to go back and forth from 5 to 6, back to 5, back to 6 to see what.
That one. We'll fix it.
Okay. I guess that's it for me on this one.
All right, Mr. Gotti.
Yeah, just going back to CF27, which is the Dedham Westwood Water District. This one feels like maybe they provided this, but this feels like this should be their mission sort of every day. And so I guess as a forward-looking document, is there anything that we need to be mindful of that may need to be done in the next 10 years in order for them to continue to fulfill this as a mission? This seemed like sort of an operating mission every day, as opposed to something that was an action that we should be implementing.
They're in the midst of completing a long-range plan, and I've been in communication with Eileen Comain. And so if I can speak to her, but if we can get our hands on that document, that may provide some answers there.
All right, any other comments? I'm not seeing any. No questions. Are there anyone wants to put anything in the Q&A for the community facilities? All right.
One more, Dave, just real quick on CF23 that does make mention of expanding the contract with Westwood Media. There may be a second sentence that we could add that encourages supporting any legislative definitions beyond cable to include streaming services, because in the long run, if Verizon were to redefine themselves as, fiber optic, or it was all wireless streaming, the current revenue stream for WMC and its ability to provide the long-term services could be something that could be at risk. So the idea of being supportive of legislation that helps ensure those long-term revenue streams for public media might be something to be helpful in here.
All right. Anyone else? Raise your hand. All right. Abby, do you want to advance to the next slide? And we'll talk about open space and recreation.
Next section is open space and recreation. And again, this section benefited from the recently adopted open space and recreation plan. Basically, as you could imagine, the recommendations support new open space protection, also focus on maintenance and improvement to existing properties, as does the open space and recreation plan. The people that participated in the process were quite enthusiastic about the possibility of a multi-purpose indoor recreation center. That came up a number of times in the survey and in the visioning session. And then sort of a recognition that when we talk about access to our open spaces and our recreational facilities, we really need to be mindful that that access has to be suitable for people with various types of disabilities. So there's some focus on that as well. There are 20 recommendations in this section divided into open space and recreation.
All right. Does anyone have any comments? Raise your hand. Ms. Conant? Yes. I'm muted too. Ms. Conant, we're both muted, so nobody heard that.
Sorry. On page 2 of 8, on the open space and rec section, it states that many of the open space and conservation areas were deemed to be in poor condition during the initial review in the open space and rec plan. Were those public or private properties that were in poor condition? Do we know?
I believe they were public.
So is there a way that we could sort of prioritize the fact that we put as an implementing action that we sort of maintain these properties long-term so that they don't become the state? I mean, it seems kind of, sad that we have these buildings and these properties that just all of a sudden become unuseful. How can we best maintain them?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was oftentimes in our open space and recreation plan, we talk a lot about preserving and protecting, acquiring new land. And the focus that we certainly picked up in the open space and recreation plan adopted last year was a focus really on maintaining what we had, in addition to the acquisition, but attention to maintaining what we had as something that hadn't really been talked about before. And I think mostly it's the open space, public open space properties that a lot are maintained for conservation purposes, and they're just not maintained. And now there's a recognition that they need some degree of maintenance or intention.
Yeah, if we could find a way to put that into the action plan and a way to do that would be great.
It's there. It's OS2. It says prepare maintenance management plans for the maintenance and management of each conservation area. That's the key recognition that we have that's what needs to be done. The reason that open space is not being maintained is because there's no management plan to maintain it. So with those management plans, you would be able to do that, and that would happen. But again, example I give is the Curry estate. That was originally a field, and when the town acquired it as conservation land, nothing was done. So the trees have all grown in. It's no longer a field. It was a farmland, and so that's a significant change. But there was no thought given to what should happen there. It just just grew in because no one did anything. No one cut the grass and maintained it as a field.
Okay, I think we need to change that.
And that's what that says.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I I had a thought in reading, and I think it was on page 4 under property. It refers to a piece of property as the former Westwood Lodge. And while I understand what that means, they no longer own it. They no longer are there. I don't know how long we keep that going, but this document may live 10 to 15 years. And 10 years from now, no one will possibly know what the Westwood Lodge, it'll just be the Green Company or Properties at 45 Clappergy or something. I just don't know if it's necessary that we continue to call it the Westwood Lodge. Maybe it is, I don't know.
I think it's good to have it there though, because we all know it's the Westwood Lodge. And even the older people who live in the community, as we continue to live and grow here, it's always been the Westwood Lodge. So it's not the Westwood Lodge, but we know where that property is. So I don't see an issue with that, but
I don't have a big problem with it. It just, for accuracy, or I know it is accurate, it is the former Westwood Lodge. It was just a comment.
We could satisfy everyone by leaving the Westwood Lodge but putting in the actual address, so it's identified where it is for those people who don't remember it.
Well, they have a name now. It's escaping me for the development.
Put it all in, right?
45 Clappertree, I think.
Yeah, I think it's called the Homes at Fort or something like that.
Yeah, you're right, Chris.
All right, thanks, Chris. Any other comments? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
I believe it's called Homes at 45.
All right, so that's the open space and recreation part. Abby, you want to advance us on to, I think, transportation?
That's right. Transportation section, 37 recommendations here, and as I think has been referred to a number of occasions as we've come to this part, expanding and improving transportation options is the thrust here, with focus on walkers and bicyclists and shuttle services and transit, things that aren't the most prominent means of transportation now. A reminder to follow the complete streets policy in all new and improved projects in town. And then some attention to improving traffic flow, a number of recommendations about that. So Steve might have more comments.
This is the oldest one. A lot of it, because we started it way back when we started the process, and then we didn't finish it, and we picked up on it again. So this went before the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Committee, and they worked on it quite a bit. So this one has actually quite a bit of input from various people.
I did notice on page 2 of 7, it looks like it's a typo or something. It says, its purpose is to identifying needs and advocate for improvements related to walkability. Is it supposed to say its purpose is to identify needs and advocate for improvements, not identifying as a verb?
So we put these things in the test to see if you're actually reading it. So far, you're 4 for 4. That one actually I've never seen.
Like a word search, only really cruel word search.
We'll take a look at that.
It threw me off, Steve. I had to go back to page 1 and start the whole document all over again because of that typo. You owe me about 3.5 hours.
I do have on page 4 of 7 of the transportation, I think it's T15. It says to pursue funding for an adaptive signalization program on 189 to improve traffic flow. I think here we need to add that we also need to pursue the left turn signal on Washington Street onto East Street, because that's a very difficult turn. And that was something that was discussed significantly with the Islington project. So we really need to pursue that because it's really difficult to turn from Washington onto East Street on that left turn. There's no left turn signal.
The adaptive signaling is completely on High Street. So if you want to say something about that left turn, we have to put it in somewhere.
Yeah, just put it in somewhere else. I'm just saying it needs to be done because the safety is on both sides. And that's a serious, that's an accident waiting to happen over there.
I think in the traffic study for that development, there was comment on that, and that it would, I'm trying to remember what it said, but I think it was, it would be almost negligible in terms of help, or I don't know, maybe Nora or Abby can help me on.
I think it was going to get an F, considering that the traffic flow was an F and it was going to get an F. But I think that having a safety signal there, especially when people are trying to cross and make that left turn, I mean, it's worth a study at the very least to see if that would work.
It has been studied.
Planning
and
board's decision, if I could just speak, the planning board's decision on that project requires the applicant to do a traffic study of the signal, whether or not to put in a left turn signal as part of the phase 3 of development, which we're moving towards now. The planning board heard from traffic consultants on both sides of the issue, and they could not agree, and no one could find conclusive evidence of how that would be improved. And so they left it that the traffic study would have to be done in phase 3. So that's coming up soon. And I expect the applicant to do the traffic study. And if it confirms the left turn arrow is necessary, then that will have to be added as part of the phase 3 part of the project as well.
So it is in the works.
Yes.
It
It's in
is.
the
And it
works.
was, as you may recall, I mean, we had a public hearing at the Sheehan School, and traffic engineer went over 5 different scenarios for lights there, and we had a lot of discussion about why it couldn't be 2 arrows in both directions, whatever. And so then it was built into the conditions of the project for this traffic study to implement a left turn signal of some sort. So I mean, I don't know how, like, this plan obviously is for the next 10 years and all, but it does get back to that kind of thing. Like, so my impression was it's going to happen, like, because it was part of the planning board's decision to have a signal there, and it's just the details will be worked out through the traffic study. So I don't know if that's consistent with what's in all the transportation stuff here. So I don't know. We just have to follow it along, I guess, and see what, and stick to the original plan.
Hey, Dave. Just a couple of comments on T11 and T12. Just, as you talk about sort of the integrated nature of this document between the sections, T11 struck me as one where there might be an opportunity dovetailing with your sustainability section, where as you talk about pursuing, shuttle buses and things, might we look to autonomous electric buses? I know that they're running some routes down in Rhode Island in the sort of Providence area between some of the colleges and universities. So that might be one that is, an idea that might be worth pursuing, that kind of, again, connects back to the sustainability. And sort of along similar lines, if you increase the number of bus shelters on any existing or any newly created routes for something like that, might we explore, any type of, solar panels on those type of structures?
Yeah, we did reference it in the sustainability section. We were mentioning shuttle buses. So yeah, all those things would apply. I don't know that we want to get down to that level of detail, but yes, absolutely.
Recognize I'm being, a little bit contradictory when I cite other things for maybe being a little bit too prescriptive. So respectfully.
Yeah, it's it's a balance.
And kind of this, as I think Steve said, this is the oldest part of the plan, and so it's a lot of these recommendations are things that were discussed 10 years ago in the Ped Bike Committee. So to actually get them, they are very prescriptive, because, and I think it's appropriate to have very detailed things here, because it's the result of years of people talking about these ideas and wanting to have them implemented. So we're finally at a point where it could be adopted into a plan, and then let's hopefully 5 years you look back and a lot of these things can be checked off. Are there other comments? Just looking to see, there's some questions. So some questions from the public here. If no one else has a question there, I'll read the questions here. So Fran Fusco, that left turn from Washington Street onto East Street was promised to the Islington residents back with the Islington development. And from NMF, if one follows FinCom meetings, several FinCom members voted recommendation of the Islington redevelopment based upon that left turn signal at Washington and East Streets. I think we have talked about that. Is there further, anyone have any other comments or questions? I don't have anything to add because I'm very excited about this part of the plan. It's something that I remember Bob Rich, I think, drafted the original version when we first started this in the Fed Bike Committee, and it has evolved into a lot of great ideas. All right, let's go on to, seeing no other discussion, let's go on to sustainability and resiliency.
Right. So as we mentioned at the outset, this is the new section of the plan that we hadn't had this section before, as one could understand. And it's quite important. And the other thing that I think we've alluded to a bit is that there are sustainable practices found throughout the plan. And it was some effort was made to make sure that this was all integrated together. This section in particular focuses on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and conservation. We are suggesting that the decisions of all town boards should include consideration of climate change. Important recommendation is that the town develop a climate change action plan. And I would note that most of the towns around us and many in the Commonwealth have done this already. And so there are plenty of models out there. So there's a sustainability subsection to this section, and then there's a resiliency section. And resiliency refers to the ability to respond to and recover from extreme events, whether they're natural or man-caused events, flooding, extreme weather, vector-borne diseases, disruption of infrastructure, and so forth. There are 43 recommendations here, and quite an effort to try to instill upon the community the importance of dealing with climate change.
Dave, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay. So I understand, I think that we're having tunnel vision when it comes to the solar panels, and that a big piece that's missing here is the consideration of the installation of solar carports rather than disturbing open space and forestry. And that maybe we could add that into this, because I know that there was a lot of negative comments and concerns about what was it, Shuttleworth Field. So maybe we could come up with some other things rather than just solar panels. And let's not lose this thought process of the solar carports.
Right. So Debbie, if I could respond. So we have S3 where we talk about install solar panels on municipal facilities. I think the thought was such as carports, but we could add, include that specific language in there too.
Yeah, I like calling them carports. That's a nice way to put it.
Good.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
R11. It says remove barriers that interfere with providing immediate and frequent day-to-day care during emergencies. Is there a clarification on what those barriers are currently? I would agree with that statement. I just I don't know what those refer to.
Yeah, there are 3 things in here that we're checking with. They came, I believe Abby said they came from the fire chief, and we're trying to check on what he really meant.
Right. Sorry, which one were you talking about specifically, Rob? Were you in
R11.
Oh, yes. So I did talk to the fire chief, yep, and he was referring to communication between just patients and then their providers, and then where to take people during, responding. So
Well, is that sounds like it's referring to R12, where he's talking about ability to share patient information.
yep.
And so, again, I support the chief in his comment and effort. My only question is, would we as a municipality be able to actually deliver on that? Because I would imagine that has a whole bunch of HIPAA implications and things. So, just feasibility as to whether that's something that gets done at a municipal level or at a state or federal level. But my immediate question was more about R11, barriers that interfere with providing immediate and frequent care. So maybe they're one and the same. I don't understand. That's all.
Right. I'll look at rewarding that. I know I did talk to the fire chief, and he was thinking along the lines of a lot of times when they respond to calls, certain patients only want to be taken to a certain place or only want to be seen by a certain provider. And so he's talking about being able to get them, some education and outreach and communication about where they can be served and may not necessarily be always their provider. So I can work on, after this draft, some more clearer language for those. It was, R11, R12 came up with, also the Environmental Action Committee had similar questions.
All right, any other comments here?
Yeah, I have one. Steve, this is my last one on resiliency objective 2. It says built awareness. Seems like it should say build awareness.
Which one? R2?
Resiliency objective 2.
Oh,
Page 7 of 9, objective 2.
Got it.
And yeah, I just wanted to echo, I have R12. When I was reading that, I couldn't envision why we were getting involved with sharing patient information. So I'd love, before I put my name to a document, I'd love to know what that is talking about.
Fair
I
enough.
agree with Kristen. Well, that's a significant HIPAA violation. We have to see.
Yeah. On the face of it, that looks like it's violating all kinds of federal laws. So I don't want my name on it if that's what it's doing.
And I can see as a first responder, boy, if you had certain information at your hands as you're walking through the door, it might be a benefit. But again, I agree that I think that this is a much bigger issue than just the municipality trying to figure this out.
It's a third rail.
So what number did you say, Chris? You had the
under resiliency objective 2. It's on page 7 of 9.
2. Oh, okay.
Objective, yeah.
Objective.
We'll get it.
And I think I heard Abby say she got it. And I just wanted to reiterate my concern about how sustainability sounded and read so different. I mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting. And maybe if you guys go back and read it, you'll see the same thing. Maybe you'll look at and say, I don't know what he's talking about. It sounds fine to me. But that was my impression when I read it. It just sounded, I don't know, draconian almost.
I had a comment about the implementation matrix. Are we there yet, or are we still kind of discussing other things?
Almost there.
Almost, yeah. I think there's a couple of Q&A questions here, unless anyone else here has. All right, so there's a question from Claire Galkowski. With the difficulties in siting solar power sources in amounts adequate to meet our energy needs locally, we may need to balance that between the need for renewable energy and the desire for preserving open space. There should be a process to find the right balance. And a comment from Kathy Shinopoulos. Want to make sure that this section does not exclude the possibility of solar fields. All right, any other comments? And I don't have a lot of comments because I was the liaison with this and
I mean,
support.
essentially, Dave, doesn't the breadth of this document kind of create those countervailing points of view that we do want to find any resilient and sustainable means of generating energy and reducing fossil fuel, while also there's goals for open space. So I think you have to take this section within the context of the larger document as well.
All right.
I have a question for Abby, maybe Mr. Chairman as well. Are we able to capture these comments that people are putting in the Q&A? Do they live beyond this?
I
I
think
can answer that.
Okay.
I do not believe they
the
do.
answer part.
Sorry, Connor, is there a way to save them?
To the best of my knowledge, no. You would have to screenshot them or write them down. You can also use your phone and take a photo of them just after the fact, but I don't believe there is a way to bring them into a Word document or something like that.
So you can copy. So if you click in the window of the answered questions and hit Control A, it will copy everything, and then you can paste that into a document. So we should do that now before before this ends. I see suddenly we have a bunch more questions. So just reading the additional questions here. NMF, experts agree that solar farms fields belong on parking lots and brownfields. You don't just cut down healthy living trees to place a solar farm. And this is now Claire Gakowski says you definitely can. They are saved when the video is saved. No, that's talking about this. You don't need to recopy. Okay. And Vicky says she agrees with both Claire and Kathy about the solar fields. Just getting everything out there. So yeah, we should, before we end the phone call, before we end the Zoom meeting, Abby, both of us make sure we copy and paste out of the question and answer section so that we can make that a part of the record here.
Okay. Remind me before I end the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, are we ready to move on to implementation?
I think so. So, so the implementation plan, that last section is really the 234 action recommendations that are that we've just gone over in from the 9 sections of the plan, all put in one matrix with a couple of columns added to it. One is responsible parties, who in each case is responsible for carrying out the recommendation. Then there's a not a prioritization, but a short-term, medium-term, long-term designation for each of the recommendations. And that aligns with both the importance of the recommendation as well as the complexity of the recommendation. Some of them require significant resources, some don't, so that all affects the timing of it. And then finally, a column where we've noted the recommendations that, as a result of the process that we went through, would appear to warrant a high priority designation. This implementation matrix has got several purposes, but one is to collect all the recommendations in one place so that somebody could take a look at it that way. It's easier than going through the whole plan. And secondly, it could be a tool for some sort of annual monitoring of the degree to which the recommendations in the plan are being addressed or implemented. And it might lend itself to an annual audit or monitoring process where the planning board could say, all right, let's take a look at what we said we were going to do and let's see what we were able to accomplish. And if there were certain things that everybody's still enthusiastic about but haven't been addressed, then maybe put some effort or resources into doing it.
Dave, I have a comment about the matrix. Maybe, Jack, we could sort of have the different sections take a look at it, because unless I'm reading it wrong, for example, page 27 of 30, S15, it's listed under short term, which is within 2 years to install electric vehicle stations for public use. And then on page 23 of 30, it says have under transportation T21, study the ability of the power grid to handle electric vehicles under medium term, which is 3 to 5 years. I think that should be flipped. I mean, we want to study the study grid before we install. I mean, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we need to really take a look at these to make sure that they're lined up properly, unless I'm reading it wrong.
Well, I mean, we already have a couple at Carby Street, right? And so, I mean, I think it's, before we go forward with a widespread set of installations, that was how I read it. And maybe I'm wrong, Deb, but that was how I read it was, before you make this, an abundant resource throughout the town, what would that do to the grid?
Yeah, but they listed it under the medium term, which is 3 to 5 years, but the installation, the short term, which is 2 years. So it's got to be reduced in terms of the study, and then make sure that the grid can handle it. Maybe it should be 2 years for the study, medium for the installation. I mean, it just makes more sense.
Yeah, don't disagree that there's, some balance there. Absolutely.
And I have my doubts here what the town can do about this, because we have no control over the power company. And I think this is something that's more being done on the state level now. I've asked that same question.
I just want to make sure that all the sections line up versus short-term, long-term, high priority. Make sure that they all line up versus being confusing and not, off sequence.
There's no question that several more people should look at that and give it some consideration.
Yeah, can you clarify the difference in the matrix? It references the planning board and planning. And then in one instance, it says planning staff.
I fixed those, Chris.
You fixed those?
Yeah, there is a difference between planning board and planning staff, and I think that's correct. But the ones that say planning will all say planning board.
Okay.
Well, no. So, I mean, I would agree. Some of them are, a staff function, more of a staff function.
The only one that says staff was for street tree fund. That's the only time planning board staff or planning staff shows up on the matrix. It's referring to that.
Yeah.
Everything else is planning or planning board.
Yeah, we'll be going over that to clarify. We haven't gone over this section as much as we could, because it's the latest section.
Okay.
And I would invite the planning board members to provide any input that they chose to on that as well.
I have a general comment, and I don't know when you want those to come out versus.
Yeah, I think we've kind of worked through. We've gone through our 9 sections, and we're on implementation, and it's it's not midnight. It took longer than ideally, but I think we got through. So now let's just go to, I think, some general discussion, and then we would go on to, at some point we would probably want to make a motion to continue this to December 1st and get the comments in and everything. But yeah, let's just see any general comments now.
Can I start, or you want me to wait?
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, yes.
So, I'm not sure a lot of you are aware that I have my background is in medical, and I'm on an advisory board for a healthcare agency. So we're kind of tracking the COVID situation, not kind of tracking, but tracking the COVID situation and its ramifications on just about everything. And one of my concerns is that, we're basing this plan on pre-COVID data. And a lot of our action plans are based on what we would have wanted 1 or 2 years ago versus the reality of what people are looking at now. And the data is out there that suggests that people don't want density. They're not using public transportation. They're buying more cars. They're looking at single family homes versus apartments. They're looking at office space is decreasing. They're finding out that people are better off working from home. I mean, for example, in New York, only 1/3 of their employees work in their offices. Dallas, 40%, L 32%. So does this plan capture this pandemic and what could happen? We know this isn't going to be the first. So my thought was, do we want to redistribute the survey, keep this plan, see what the people see where we're at now and what their wants and needs are, compare it to what they thought when it was first redistributed. And then, all throughout our planning process, we always say, we want to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences. We spent a lot of time on this plan. Do we want to move forward knowing that things are changing? I mean, they're saying that we know stores are closing. Look at the vacancies throughout Islington and University. I mean, chain stores are closing. You have to be inventive in how you're going to keep a business going. Landlords aren't getting rents. How are we going to be, forward thinking in this? And are we capturing this all in this plan? This is a phenomenal plan, but do we want to add more to it because of what's happened? And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, knowing what I see and the data that's out there, I'm not sure that this plan captures that. I mean, they don't want density. I mean, we have to look at businesses and commercial. We've had tax abatements for commercial properties in Westwood. We really need to consider all of this before we move forward. That's my recommendation. But that's a discussion that needs to be had. So I'm interested in hearing what other people think.
Well, I think I'm not disregarding what you said. I think that we don't know how to react to this. I mean, we could be looking at a short-term phenomenon, or we could be looking at something that's got long-term implications. I don't think we know that. And so I think we could add some material to the plan, but I don't know as if we would necessarily change recommendations regarding density of housing units and so forth, because those have the housing crisis hasn't gone away. There are still people looking for housing. The number of housing units that are available to people in the Commonwealth is far below what the demand is. So I'm not sure all these people aren't going to be moving into single family homes on 1-acre lots. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
I agree.
There's that space.
I
So
agree.
I don't know what to do about that. Regarding retail, retail was undergoing a change before COVID that I don't think the development community was really acknowledging. I mean, the people have been moving to online shopping long before COVID, and I think COVID's going to exacerbate that and maybe accelerate that a little bit. But that was a trend that was well underway. So
yeah, I think that was sort of my comment earlier. Is you look at something like the North Shore Mall, which lost several anchor retailers and things, they turned it into sort of a restaurant row. And so that was my sort of guiding, caution, is that as much as there was an expression of a desire for coffee shops and cafes and restaurants, we need to maintain the right and healthy mix of what that retail is that draws foot traffic. So that was, Deb, an area where I was agreeing that there needs to be some tip to the current situation to make sure that the ecosystem that we build is healthy and resilient. So that's one where I think we could probably do some of that. I don't know, given the current zoning and areas that are still available for adding housing, how you eliminate some of the density stuff that is in there, much to what Jack was just talking about. So hear you. I think that we're all trying to assess what does the future look like given where we are. So I don't know that we can stop the entire thing, but I think there are things that we should put in here as considerations given what we do know.
Yeah, let us try something, Deb, to get some language in there that recognizes that there is potential changes happening here, and that the plan has to be flexible in that regard. There's been a lot in planning literature about planning under COVID, so we'll take a look at that and see what we can add. It's a fair point.
This is Charlie Donahue. I think it's an excellent idea. What I'd suggest is if we ask each of the people who have done sections, if they could come up with an idea of kind of an addendum saying, we've been through an awful lot here, and what issues in this section might need to be reconsidered, might need to be updated, and suggest very strongly that instead of waiting 20 years for a new plan, that maybe we recommend strongly that within 2 years, we reconvene this issue and make adjustments and changes based on what comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I do think it'd be worth mentioning and highlighting, as best we know now, what might be different. We can't give solutions yet. We don't know how this is going to come out, but at least to highlight what might be different and suggest strongly that we do suggest strongly that this whole plan be reconsidered with all of the changes that we may know much better in 2 years. But I think it'd be a terrific idea just to highlight and say to people, these are issues that may be different. Thank you.
Great.
I mean, I would also respond that, since the committee, met in March, the full steering committee met in March, was their last in-person meeting. And then since that time, they were working on, this final draft. And we did take another look at it over the last several months, each section with what we know now and what's happened. So we have gone back and looked at it. I'd say it's mostly the newest items, are in the sustainability and resiliency section. That's where we talk about the main recommendation, or the big recommended action item is to have a climate action and resiliency plan. And that's where it also focus on emergency management and being able to respond to natural and man-made events. So that's where the bulk of the changes come from. We do also, what's been really helpful with, since COVID was that our department, the planning board, and many other boards have gone electronic in our applications. We do have that recommendation in there in our community facilities section too for other departments, and with a recommendation for all town offices to have electronic permitting. So that's been really helpful, so that no work has not slowed down during COVID once we went remote. And then also in our economic development section, we've talked a lot about trying to have a range of businesses, but we've also, since we started this with the survey and the visioning session, we had a desire for businesses that were social destinations, so restaurants and coffee shops. And since COVID, since we haven't been able to do that much socializing and mingling, we realize how important that is and how much people really do desire that. So that is still important. That's emphasized in the plan, especially in the town centers and economic development section, is trying to provide those social gathering and community spaces.
Kelly, I think that idea that you had is a really good one, because with the, the unemployment rate, people have a difficulty with taxes, rents and mortgages and things like that. Just to have that piece in there is going to be, help make it more clear that we're considering the implications of COVID.
By Deb, by his idea, did you mean the revisiting it in 2 years, that one?
I think by adding a comment underneath there about the implications that we're having that could be, require changes. We have a lot of big ticket items under the recreation department, under, many other different areas. And, you know, how much can the residents absorb if there's being abatements done, you know, commercial, the retail isn't there, you know, the hotel taxes, the meal taxes, it's all going to be on us as residents. And in order for us to survive as a community, we need taxes. It's all going to be on us as residents. And in order for us to survive as a community, we need taxes. It's all going to be on us as residents. And in order for us to survive as a
Well, you
community,
need to turn your
we
microphone.
need
That's interesting.
Was that?
Bill, I think you had your microphone on. With the,
I do actually.
That's pretty good. Does you want to keep going?
You can hear the echo. But anyway, well, I have the floor for a second. Instead of 2 years, I think maybe even 1 year, you might want to revisit this.
Or even 6 months. I mean, it's a plan. So if we revisit it 3 months, 6 months, the important thing is that we as a community come together and help each other. That's what we're all about. We're trying to come together as a community. And if we're having financial issues, I know there was a lot of people upset at town meeting. I think that, you know, finances are a big problem for a lot of people right now. And we don't know what they say that the prediction is that this is not going to be the first pandemic that we've had, that there will be future ones. And are we prepared for that from a standpoint across the board in every planning aspect? I'm not saying to get rid of it, but let's make sure we have it built in there that this isn't, you know, solid, that 2-year plan or that 3-year plan. And
To that end, right? I mean, this is a planning document, a forward-looking document. None of it is a mandate of things that have to be done. And I think you're right. I think there's going to be, when you get to a point of discussing the actual, is this something we should do? We may be a year or two from now when we actually get to that. And to Charlie's point, there probably will be a lot more that we've learned in the interim that would become part of the discussion of should this go forward as was written, or what other types of considerations should be taken. So I'm not dismissing at all your point of view. I think it's actually something that would have to be naturally part of the process, because we don't know all the things that are going to come out of this yet, and we may not for 12 to 24 months.
Agree. It is just, I think it's important that we document it in there. It has to be documented in the plan that this is a consideration that may change the plan.
Yeah.
That's
I
all I'm
think,
asking.
Rob made mention about some sort of preamble at the beginning of this, and I see no reason why you can't have a similar disclaimer. Say most of this plan was created pre-COVID. We understand things are going to change possibly, and we'll revisit this as needed. Could be 6 months, could be 12 months. We can write a number in there if necessary. But I think if anything, this country has come to understand that we got to be flexible. We figured that out in the last 8 months, that all bets are off. Things are different now. And I think people who go back and read this and know it was written in 2020 know we're kind of just flying by. We don't know how things are going to change. So I think if we just put a short message in the beginning of this, so that when people read it, they read it with an eye towards, yeah, right, things could change. Things may be different. Restaurants may not be necessary in 12 months from now because everyone's fearful of going out to eat. I don't know. So
to Charlie's point of the section owners going back and revisiting with an eye for anything that might be reconsidered or having a footnote to it because of COVID, I think the 5 of us should do the same thing, right? Is look at those sections and just say, okay, you know, more eyes and more thoughts on that type of stuff is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's a basic risk assessment sort of thing. It's like looking at this and saying 2 things. You know, are there things in here that just that might not be feasible in the future? And are there things that people might not, it might change people's desire, you know? So the whole plan is kind of, this is a wish list of, it's an aspirational, like these are the kind of things we believe the community wants to do. And like you said, maybe in the future, no one wants to go to restaurants anymore or something. So I think, you could highlight what those key sort of risks are, and then in some sort of a preamble or an addendum or something, and in each section, are there assumptions that would be changed dramatically? But I think highlight that stuff and say that it should be reviewed when we know better, in 6 months or a year. But
Well, we know everybody's life has changed in the last 6 months. We all do things differently, so we don't know in the next 6 months how much differently we'll be doing things.
Mr. Neville, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think we got to be a little careful here. We don't know. It's hard to put into a plan now and start second guessing what is going to look like in 9 months to 2 years. And I agree that a statement up front is probably helpful, that we're doing the best we can with some unknown circumstances of the future. Abby and Jack did have us each go back to our sections and consider COVID. On the economic development side, we made sure we didn't just write, we want this or that kind of retail or service. We want strong financial companies that are diversified so that we're not at risk. I also think it's important that we understand Westwood is actually quite lucky. I listened to one of the largest consulting firms in the world this afternoon, and their best guess is COVID is done with a vaccine. Maybe we get back to normal by July. And their thought on the economic side was that there will be industries that are affected and industries that are not. And I think we're probably pretty fortunate. We don't have an aircraft Boeing company in Westwood. We're very diversified. And to try for us to guess what we might look at is probably difficult to do in this plan. And I think if things go crazy, maybe you have to redo the plan completely in 2 years. Otherwise, we should just do the best we can. So I think, we have addressed it, and it's if we could predict the future, we'd be geniuses. And I don't think we should try.
I don't think we're predicting. I think we're just being transparent in the fact that we know that it's out there. We know that this can have implications or, unintended consequences in the future. And it's just a plan. So to document that is not a bad thing.
And I agree, documenting it up front is great, but to try to drive it through each section and modify what we think is best today, when we really don't know the future, is going to be very difficult and become confusing. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with Peter, and I agree with what Chris says. We should just put in an explanation somewhere in the beginning there to explain it, and we shouldn't try to do anything further at this point, because we really don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know, so that's why you should do it. I disagree with you, but
Well, you don't know, so you can't really go into it in any detail because you just don't know. And I think we made it clear this is a plan, and of course, plans change.
All right, there are some comments in the Q&A. I'm going to read the comments from the Q&A, and unfortunately, some of these relate back to other things, but we'll just go through. So from Kathy, regarding charging station scheduling, I think Tom Philbin could help. That's the energy manager of the town. From Jan Galkowski on the EV chargers, facts are Westwood is not independent of the world at large, and there will be, like it or not, a demand for EV chargers and a push by retail businesses to install them simply because they will lose traffic to locations which have them. This trend is documented in open and market literature. Accordingly, these trends may overtake the pace Westwood deems to be suitable for its determination. From NMF, I agree that this comprehensive plan should be revisited in its entirety, more so by Westwood residents and not all of these boards and committees, and input should be solicited via a mass mailing to every household in this community of Westwood. Things will definitely change. Another NMF, another comment, not in an addendum, referring to this we're just talking about, I think. The disclaimer needs to be front and center. From Sandra, without considering the financial implementation of COVID, we are ignoring our townspeople and how priorities have shifted. From Vicky Macready's, suggests for an edit regarding comment on tone of sustainability and resiliency, removing the last sentence from paragraph 2 of the introduction. Failure or others would soften the tone. And so we'll save, as we said, we'll save all these comments so that they can be read over carefully. And that sentence didn't add any information. So those are the additional comments.
Just like to say, if I could, I'd be happy to make an addition to my section, just with ideas of things we should consider. I don't think we have anything in our plan, for example, about a food pantry in Westwood. I don't know if you even know we have it. We do have a food pantry. There's people who've been unemployed, don't know where their mortgage is. So we have people lining up now in Westwood for food pantry. So might that be a subject for the future to look at? We have 60 kids who come to Westwood to be educated here, mostly Blacks, Hispanics, as part of the Medco program. Could we be more creative in helping people like that out who go home to a lot of problems? Could we be doing more? So we haven't considered that much, but there was an interesting discussion early on. Could we do more for diversity and things like that? There's a lot in here about more outdoor recreation areas, which will be healthy no matter what, even if we come out of this. So I think there are some things we could suggest that might be looked at more carefully when we know what's going on, which we won't probably, my guess is for a year and a half to 2 years. But I think it'd be valuable if people could offer comments of things that might be different in the future, that we could begin to just alert people that somebody should be looking back into this, not 20 years from now. And I think these are just some suggestions, and I just support, you don't have to do it. If you're writing a section, you don't want to do it, fine. But I just think it would be alert the town that we're not insensitive to what we're going through here. Thank you.
All right. I think I don't see any other comments. It might be a good time to, what's the next steps? Abby, you want to kind of summarize very briefly kind of what the next steps are for us, and then I will entertain a motion.
Sure. You also had in your packet, you had a number of letters of support from various boards and committees. The Environmental Action Committee, they did meet last week, and they have some edits, and so I still need to get you those as well. And same with the select board, they have a meeting next week, and they're going to get us more complete comments. So my recommendation is to continue this hearing to Tuesday, December 1st. And so if anyone has further edits, and it sounds like some of you have gone through the plan, I know Chris mentioned some in a couple sections. If everyone could send me your specific edits, preferably in writing. I don't know if you've marked it up on the plan, hard copy, or I could scan those in, or because I will go through and I've taken notes tonight, so I'll get you an updated revised red line copy of the plan that I'll get to the planning board and post available with the agenda and on the website prior to your next meeting. If everyone could send me your edits as soon as possible, but definitely by November 24th, because I would need to compile them so that you can have them prior to that meeting. So the goal would be try to have them. I would like to try to get that posted to you on Wednesday next week. So if you have them, it sounds like there's a lot here tonight. So if people have them, if you have them now, please send them along so I can start integrating them. So you'll have a fully revised redline version. So you can email them to me, and I'll try to create one new document.
You say the edits that we discussed tonight, you want us to send to you?
Well, if you had something specific that you didn't go over tonight. So I've been taking notes, but some people, if you have, edits or word changes or anything more that you want included, please let me know, because I'm going to go through one document and put everyone's comments into one new document. So depending on how much, if people give me, it'll take some time to do that.
I mean, I think wouldn't it be very helpful, Abby, for getting specific text, instead of if you had something you felt really strongly about, you want to incorporate that, I think an email with the text would make it a lot easier to add that.
Yep.
And then we'll get this very marked up version for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So are we good to, would someone like to make a motion to continue the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to continue this public hearing for discussion on the comprehensive plan till our meeting, virtual meeting, Tuesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. via Zoom.
Okay, there's a motion from Mr. Path, and I think Mr. Gotti seconded that. And there was one other question posted, or not a question, but just Vicky McReady said that excellent idea, Charles Donahue, about the food pantry and helping Metco children, and would add people who are renting. And the thing coming up might be homelessness. It's at the end of the eviction moratorium starts to take a toll. I just want to make sure we got that into here. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Path.
Yes.
Mr. DeLay.
Yes.
Ms. Conant. Ms. Conant, you were muted, I think.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. And Mr. Gotti.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So this public hearing will be continued to our next meeting on December 1st, 7 p.m. Zoom.
Thank you very much to all the members of the planning board.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the whole steering committee and all your efforts. It's a huge undertaking.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we're not done. We're not done yet. We have one. The next item on the agenda is the continuation of the public hearing for the open space and recreation plan. Abby, do you want to tell us what's the latest on?
Yes, so after your last meeting, we did get the final letter of approval from the state on the open space and recreation plan. One thing we did also, I think it was at one of your earlier meetings, maybe in September, we noticed that the Shuttleworth property was incorrectly listed as an Article 97. Our town council did just do a check on those other properties. Also, Morrison Park and Field and the Sheehan School Fields were also listed as Article 97. We did look into those, and those are not. So we'd like to just remove those, fix that on table 14, and take that out of the map that those properties are not Article 97, and then resubmit that to the state. So we'll submit that to the state, but they've already approved the plan. I don't expect any changes. So I think we could make that change to those two properties in the table and on the map, and then close the public hearing.
I think, Abby, we need to remove the Blue Heart Tavern from page 39. I think it's still there since we no longer are preserving that. So that needs to be removed as well.
I don't have the plan in front. What does it say on page 39?
I just made a note that said need to remove Blue Heart Tavern from page 39 of the open space and rec plan. So I'm not sure. I don't actually have the wording in front of me, but I think it was the preservation of it and moving of it.
Okay.
It's on page 39.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a qualifying statement?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Rackaman and Sawyer actually did the title search for the Sheehan properties. I did the title search for Morrison. I'm very confident that that is not an Article 97 based on the exercise we went through for last spring's town meeting. I still have to look at the June Street and the School Street playgrounds. I think when and if I can get that research done, that those will not come back as Article 97 as well. So there may be two other changes. They're still functioning the way they're supposed to function. There's no diminution in value or how they're used, but we've got to get it right.
All right. So there are potentially additional edits, but what's our normal process here? Like, we're not taking any new information in, so we could end the public hearing process, and that's really the only thing we need to do this evening, right? Or do we need to vote to submit it or to do, because it's already been approved? It's more, these are corrections that would happen. Abby, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I think you can just accept the revised plan, and we're just going to close the public hearing, and then I'll resubmit it to the state. I don't think they'll necessarily perform a review because they've already approved it, but I think they'll keep it on file.
So we basically, we could close the public hearing, and then there might be additional corrections. So should we vote on those corrections as they come up, or?
Yeah, I think later on we could bring those back up at a later time, because it may be a while in it.
All right, so then it sounds like we would close the public hearing, and then after these, we have additional corrections. At that point, we would come back to us as a business item to approve resubmitting it with those corrections, right? So we're not automatically making any edits to it now. This is not authorizing like automatic changes. So we'll just have to keep like correcting things if we if we find additional inaccuracies.
Right, we could do that at a later time, come back at another meeting.
So, Pat, I guess I just have a clarification question. Are you saying that we thought that Morrison and Sheehan was Article 97?
No, I don't know how it was put in the initial plan.
Oh, but it's in the plan as Article 97 is what you're saying.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's documented as being Article 97?
The plan identifies them as being Article 97 incorrectly, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to make it clear, we did already notify the state of one correction, and that was regarding the Shuttleworth field. So we already corrected the incorrect Article 97 listing for that. And the request that's before you tonight is to also correct the Sheehan Fields listing as Article 97, to remove that from Table 14. So the Sheehan Fields and Morrison Park. Then there are two other parcels, School Street Playground and June Street Playground, which will be reviewed in the future. And if necessary, we'll go back and make a further correction. But just to be clear, we are going to the state with the two corrections now about the Sheehan Fields and Morrison Park.
Okay, so then if we are good with this, then we need a motion to approve making those two corrections, and to also, and then separately we could close the public hearing in a second motion. Or we could just, why don't we just, someone make a motion, we'll just go through it. Would someone like to close the public hearing first?
No, we have to approve
I think you have to approve the change first.
Well, but we're going to have additional changes, so we're not taking in new information, so there's no, the public hearing can be closed because we are not taking additional information in that's substantive to the.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the changes mentioned earlier to Morrison Park and the Sheehan Fields.
All right, there's a motion, Mr. Path, second by Mr. Gotti. Is there any discussion of those changes?
Yeah, I just have a question. Do we have, I mean, not that I'm, saying that this isn't accurate, but do we have any information like that we are, 100% sure, Pat? I mean, was there stuff
Well, let me explain. Rackham and Sawyer did a very thorough search, and they've issued an opinion letter that the Morrison Fields are not Article 97. When we talked about putting Morrison in, I did a search of the title last winter and found that we had bought it from the trustees of the railroad, the bankruptcy trustee from the railroad. So there was nothing that I saw in the deed that would indicate that it was Article 97, and I found no further action that affirmatively put it in Article 97. And we were prepared to have a vote on town meeting floor whether or not the town wanted to put it in. So I feel very good about that. And I feel very good about the research that Rackham and Sawyer did.
So I guess my question is I'm sort of a paper person. So is there going to be documentation, somewhere saying that these aren't in Article 97?
There is an opinion letter from council that the Morrison, I'm giving you a verbal opinion that I don't believe I'm sorry, there is an opinion letter from outside counsel. The Sheehan Fields are not Article 97. Okay. And I'm issuing an opinion that Morrison is not Article 97.
And this is because in the current version of the plan, it's listed in a table as being Article 97 for both of those places, right?
Correct. And I cannot tonight opine on June Street or School Street playground. Otherwise I would, and I'll come back to you when I can.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the edits to the plan to update the table that lists that identifies those two properties as being Article 97 protected, to remove that, as was done for the Shuttleworth property, which was also listed incorrectly in the past, Article 97. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Path?
Yes.
Mr. Delay? Mr. Delay, we didn't hear you.
He's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Ms. Conant?
I abstain, just until, seeing further documentation to support this. I abstain from the vote.
And Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So there are 4 votes yes and 1 abstention. And
I'll make a motion. We close this public hearing.
Mr. Path moves to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Gotti seconds the motion. Is there discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. This is to close the public hearing for discussion of the open space and recreation plan. Mr. Path?
Yes.
Mr. Delay?
Aye.
Ms. Conant? Ms. Conant, are you abstaining from this, or how do you vote on the closing the public hearing?
I abstain.
And Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So there's 4 votes in favor of closing the public hearing. So the public hearing is closed. And that's the end of that agenda item for now. Other business items on the agenda. We have an A&R, approval not required, submission for 25 Fox Meadow Drive and 300 Fox Hill Street. Abby, are you going to lead on that, or do we have?
Yes, sure. The property owner is in, the engineer is here tonight. I'm sorry they've been waiting all this time, but You do have an A&R in your packet. It was for 25 Fox Meadow Drive and also 300 Fox Hill Street. What this A&R is doing is there's a parcel in the back of the lot, parcel A, that a few years ago was removed from the back of the Fox Meadow Drive parcel and was given to the one on Fox Hill Street. That A&R in 2014 was never followed through on. So this A&R puts that parcel in the back to lot 4, which is 25 Fox Meadow Drive, to combine it with the one on Fox Meadow Drive to make it a buildable lot. This was a lot that was part of the old Fox Meadow Estate Captain Crossan subdivision. So there's no change in frontage, but it was, a piece of land in the back that had been rearranged over time, but is now proposed to go back to its original configuration as it was approved in the original subdivision application from several years ago. So I recommend that you can endorse this plan. So your recommendation tonight, and then when you can, I'll need the board members to stop by the office to sign the A&R plan to then be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. And I think the property owner and engineer is here if anyone has any questions, but I didn't see any issues with the plan.
Does anyone?
Abby, this is just reverting back to the original property line?
Yes.
All right.
Any questions? I don't have any questions. You want to take these one at a time then? So 25, this is,
well,
that's, oh, sorry, no, never mind. I just saw it wrong here. So it's just the one, it's 25 Fox Meadow.
Yeah.
What is 300 Fox Hill Street? That's the back.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of both parcels. So it's a motion to endorse the A&R plan for 300 Fox Hill and 25 Fox Meadow.
All right, so is there a motion to endorse the A&R plan?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion from Mr. Paff, seconded by Mr. Gotti. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And so it's approved. Or not approved, but it's
endorsed.
Endorsed. We endorse the A&R.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy, for waiting here.
Well, thank you for your time on a late night. Thanks again for you, Mr. Chairman, and the board members. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, other business. We have meeting minutes from October 27th. Does anyone have any corrections or edits to those meeting minutes?
What I read looked good to me.
Same.
I have
Make a motion to approve the minutes submitted for October 27th.
I'll second that.
There's a motion by Mr. Paff, seconded by Mr. Gotti. Is there any further discussion of the meeting minutes from October 27th? Then we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Aye.
Mr. DeLay?
Abstain.
Ms. Conant?
You're muted.
Sorry, abstain. I wasn't there.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the meeting minutes are approved, 3 in favor, 2 abstentions. And that's all the business that I have here. Abby, if there's some quick updates, maybe there's some other items on the agenda.
Dave, I had one thing I just wanted to bring up with, I guess pursuant to the comprehensive plan. I went through and on the implementing items or the action items in the plan, at my count, I got 37 items for the planning board to look into zoning issues, zoning things. And I'm not saying this is in a hurry or anything, but it is our job as an implementing board of this plan to look into these things. And we can't just assume it's going to take care of itself. I would like to suggest that at some point in the near future, we start looking at these things either as a board or as a subcommittee, and then bring it to the board, something like that, so that we don't drop the ball on implementing this comprehensive plan. And maybe we wait, obviously, for the plan to be endorsed by us. But I 37 items, and I'm sure I missed a few, but there's a lot in every section that is basically asking us to revisit zoning, to encourage this or consider this, so I'd like to.
There's a fair bit of duplication in there though, Chris. I mean, just that one that you highlighted alone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Multiple places. So
That didn't even go into my count of 37.
Oh, it didn't.
Otherwise it'd be over 40. Yeah. So it's just something, food for thought for the future for this board, that I think we need to be more on top of it than, more proactive, I guess. Because if it involves zoning changes, that means it's town meeting, and that means it's a lengthy process.
Yep, and with all of the sort of, prioritization and, near, medium, and longer term, not all of it needs to be taken up at once either, because it's not all for next town meeting or anything like that.
Right, and to Debbie's point earlier, some of these we may have to say, yeah, but COVID, so we can't do anything. Our hands are tied right now because it's obvious there's a connection with COVID and density or congregating in spaces or whatever. So, but I think out of 37 items, we'll find a few that we can actually do something about. And
I think your point is well taken in terms of what gets measured gets done. Is there, should this be a standing item on the first meeting after the election and swearing in of new members and all of that stuff every year? So we revisit not only what is on this plan, but what progress has been made against things over the past X number of months or years.
Yeah, I agree with all of that sentiment.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Chris. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I think, didn't you just put a question out to Abby though about?
I cut off Abby. Sorry about that. Jumped in there.
What was there a question? I don't remember.
He asked if you had anything else to add.
Oh, no, sorry, no.
She wasn't saying anything, and I thought I would just go ahead, but now here we are. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn in a second. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. Delay, I think, is gone. Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, and we are adjourned at 10:30.